clock, so I'm going to get us started. But welcome everyone. My name is Christina Kind. I am a program director
Bienvenidos a todos,
at
mi
the
nombre es
Tahoe
Cristina
Truckee
Cain,
Community Foundation. Thanks so
soy
much for attending today's
una
community
de las
learning
directoras de la
training.
Fundación de
Yeah, I'm
Tahoe Truckee,
curious how many
la
joined us
Fundación
for the
Tahoe
first
Truckee.
session. Today is the second session in
Vamos a
our
tener la
series, and so
segunda
maybe
sesión de la
you could just
serie.
like raise your hand using the chat feature or in the window, or do a thumbs up, whatever emoji you want, to just indicate you were at the first training.
Quieren poner en el chat o levantar la
Your
mano
camera on,
o
yeah.
poner un
Okay, I'm
emoji
seeing
si
some thumbs
estuvieron en
up.
la primera parte de la
Yes.
presentación. Nos gustaría
And
saber
it's
quiénes
okay
están
if you weren't. Dr. Herbert
Y
will
está bien
go
si
into
no
that
han
in a little
estado en
bit,
la
and
primera
we'll make
parte,
the recording available. We do have the
pero
recording
vamos
from
a tener
the first
la
session. But
grabación disponible.
just want to start. I know it's a heavy week. A lot of
Sé que
people
es
are
una semana
experiencing
ha
some
sido
intense
pasada.
emotions, and so
Yo sé que
this
muchas
training
personas han
feels like the right
experimentado,
place to show up today. And I
han
just want to
experimentado
acknowledge all of
diferentes
you for showing
emociones
up,
y
and thank
este
you for being here.
entrenamiento realmente va a ayudarnos a
Mike, do you
sentirnos un
mind
poco mejor.
changing the slide?
Mike, ¿puedes cambiar la diapositiva, por favor?
Next slide, please. Thank you. So today's program will be offered in both English and
El programa
Spanish.
de hoy
So thank
se va a
you,
ofrecer en
Sandra, for
inglés y
interpreting
español.
for us.
Gracias, Sandra, por
If you prefer to
interpretar para
listen to
nosotros el día
today's
de hoy.
program
Si
in
usted
English,
prefiere
you don't have to do
eh,
anything. And just a few quick things
escuchar
when
la
we talk
presentación
about
en
doing
inglés, no
English
tiene
and
que hacer
Spanish
nada. Si la quiere
translation,
hacer
so
en
we can hear
español, tiene
everyone
que
in the
ir
main
el
broadcast
canal,
channel.
la que dice a
All
español.
questions asked in Spanish will be translated into
Todas las
English.
preguntas que
In
se
addition, we do
hagan en
have live
español van a ser traducidas al
transcript, which
inglés.
allows you to see transcript in English and
Vas a
Spanish.
ver que
Although my
realmente las
understanding is it does
preguntas
not work
se
out
van
in
a
cell
poder ver
phone.
en el otro idioma también.
We try to pause in between slides to
Vamos a
let
tratar
Sandra
de
catch up
pausar
in the
en los
interpretation. And
diferentes
so we do ask
mientras
if you
hablamos
are
para que yo pueda
making a comment
interpretar.
or a question today to also try to pause so that Sandra
Les
can
quiero pedir
keep up.
también que también pasen para
I'm
que
going to
también
take
yo
the
pueda
lesson and
eh,
slow down. Um, and do we have
interpretar el
slides
mensaje
in both
completo.
English and Spanish
Tenemos
today?
la presentación en inglés y en español.
We do for the majority of our presentation. At the very end, we'll
Tenemos la
to multiple.
presentación por la mayoría en la presentación en inglés y en
So
español.
if you will see at the top of your screen here one little bubble that will say Maeve Donovan's screen. That is how you view the slides in English. You'll see another
En
little
la
bubble
parte de
that
arriba, la
says
burbujita que
Las
dice May Donovan, esta va a ser la parte en
and that is how
español
you'll
y
view
la
the
otra va a
slides
ser
in
la
Spanish. So
diapositivas
if
en
anyone is
español.
not viewing them in their preferred language,
Si
just look
alguno
for
no lo
the
está viendo en
banner at the
el
top of your
idioma
screen
que
and you should be able to
prefiere,
navigate to
usted
Maeve
puede
to
realmente
view the
nos deja
slides in
saber y
English.
vamos a indicarles
So
cómo ver
thanks.
el
So before we introduce today's trainers, I wanted to give you a little bit of a background. Oh, and I lied. I
Ya
said
que
I was going
empezamos
to do
el
the
día de hoy,
pre-survey when I
quiero darle un poquito de
didn't. So as I'm
antecedentes sobre la
talking, if you
invitación.
could please take the pre-survey. I just
Y
dropped the
antes de que
link into the
empecemos,
chat box. I will try to
pediría
keep
que
dropping
tomen
the link
esta
in for
encuesta
those joining us
antes de
later.
comenzar.
It's helpful for us to understand how to curate these more
Sería muy bueno
meaningful
para
to
nosotros
you
saber
as a
cómo
participant
podemos
moving forward. So thanks for
adaptarlo
your
a sus
time in
necesidades.
taking the survey.
So I'm sorry to interrupt. I
Please,
do
no.
want to add, please take the survey during our in-person meeting.
Por favor,
Our
tomen la
training
encuesta
four and our
durante el
DEI action
entrenamiento que va a ser
planning. I
en
will be doing a
persona.
raffle. So from those who took the
Yo
survey,
en
there'll
la
be a raffle.
presentación de diversidad,
So
equidad
yeah, please
e
do it. You can
igualdad,
win something genuine.
Oh,
voy a hacer una rifa.
Dr. Herbert, that's a great
Les animo a
incentive.
todos que por favor tomen la
So our
encuesta.
mission is to bring
Nuestra
together
misión
trusted
es
partners to align
unimos a
strategies and
socios de
inspire
confianza para
philanthropy
alinear
into a
estrategias y
resilient
inspirar la
community and
filantropía,
environment.
fomentando una comunidad y un entorno resiliente.
Next slide, please. We do this through grant making to nonprofits,
Lo
scholarships
hacemos a
to high school
través
students
de
in the
becas
workforce, as
comunitarias,
well as
otorgamiento
focusing
de
special
subvenciones a organizaciones
attention
sin
on our
fines de
community's
lucro,
well-being,
fondos de
mental health,
respuesta
and
ante
housing.
emergencias,
And
ampliar la
Ginger, I
vivienda para
see
la
that your
fuerza
hand is up. Do you have a
laboral,
question, or is that just
fortalecer
up from before?
el fortalecimiento familiar a través de la fundación y soluciones basadas en el mercado para la salud de los bosques.
I'm going to keep going. Oh, I think it was up from before. Thanks for taking it down. Next slide, please.
La próxima diapositiva, por favor.
We are led by a visionary board of directors who are deeply engaged in
Tenemos
our
una
community goals.
increíble
Do we have any of
junta
our board
directiva
members joining us
que tiene
today?
una visión.
I'm not sure that we do, but thank you so much for your leadership. And
Muchas
we're joined
gracias
by
por
a
su
very
liderazgo.
talented team joining me
Tenemos
today
un
from
equipo
the
muy
Tahoe Truckee Community
talentoso.
Foundation. In addition to Maeve Donovan, who is our program manager, are my
Aparte de
colleagues
May
Phyllis
Donovan, que es
Khan and
nuestra
Marisa Adehi.
encargada del programa, tenemos
So the Community Foundation has been on its own learning journey in this space. In 2020, our board came together to ensure that our mission and network are driven by equity.
Hemos
with a
estado,
focus
la
on
Fundación de
redistributing
Datos Desagregados ha
our
estado en una
resources to
trayectoria
students who
aquí
really
para
suffer.
servir a nuestra
We
comunidad
decided to go
y a
beyond a value
crear
statement,
en
which you
un
can see
lugar
here
de
on the
hogar.
screen,
Estamos en una
by
búsqueda
creating a
apasionada para una
comprehensive
comunidad
learning journey
justa
for both our
en la
board
sesión
and our staff.
en la región de
We've aligned
Tahoe
these
y en las
efforts with
personas de todas
Equidad
las
Collaborative of
razas,
Tahoe, Turkey,
etnias,
which many of
géneros,
you are partners
orientaciones
here
sexuales,
joining us
habilidades
today,
y identidades
which is a
tengan la
program
oportunidad
of
de
community
prosperar por
foundation
igual.
to explore how
Incluiremos
TTCF can truly
intencionalmente la
lead
equidad
and
en todos los
provide
aspectos
value
de
to the
la
broader
gobernanza,
community.
operaciones y
So this has been
programación.
essential to moving from
Incluiremos,
statements to
incluiremos
action in a meaningful
recursos de
way.
manera equitativa
So
en
led
nuestra
by our board members, Erin Kilmer-Neal and Emily Gendron, and CCTT's former director, Allison Schwadner, our learning journey really set the foundation for our work today.
Realmente
We've worked closely with
nuestros
nonprofit
directores
partners,
anterior,
giving them
Allison,
the
parte de la
tools,
Junta,
frameworks,
realmente
much
han
like we're
creado
doing today, facilitation guides, and
para poder
practical steps to spark meaningful
crear
conversations. This
lo
journey
que
has
es
also
hoy la
pushed us to
Fundación de Tahoe
understand the systematic
Turkey.
structures of racism
Nuestro
and
objetivo es
inequality,
profundizar nuestra
leading us to
comprensión sobre las
partnerships like the
razas, racismo y
Barracuda
equidad social.
Championship PGA Tour golf tournament. And you can switch the
Y
slide.
realmente hay diferentes
To make a broader
organizaciones.
impact
Esta serie es posible que sea
on our
generosidad
community,
del
they
torneo de
funded
golf,
initiatives like
PGA,
our Spanish
Barracuda,
language
y
interpretation
fomentamos un
and
ambiente
leadership
seguro para el
training,
diálogo
and
abierto
this
y
community
buscamos y
belonging
transformar las
series.
estructuras y
So
prácticas
today our
dentro de
focus is on deepening our
la
collective understanding of
comunidad para
equity
promover
through
la
data. Our
inclusión y
main
la
goal
equidad.
today is to really foster a safe space for this learning,
Lo que
and we
nuestro objetivo
cannot
el
do
día de
this
hoy
work
es
alone, and are so excited to bring
enfatizar un
Dr.
espacio
Leah Herbert
seguro
and
sobre
Dr.
la raza
Galaxina Wright,
y la
all the way
equidad
from Florida,
social.
who are here to
Que
be our
tengamos un
guides
diálogo
for the
abierto.
next 2 hours. And so with gratitude, I am now going to turn it
Realmente
over to
con
Dr.
mucha
Herbert.
gratitud le quiero dar la bienvenida a la doctora Leah.
And Dr. Herbert, please lead us.
A la doctora Herbert, y por favor
Thank you
puede
so much,
comenzar.
Krista. Okay, awesome.
Gracias,
Got the slides.
Cristina.
Thank you so much. It's so great to see everyone today.
Gracias a
We're
todos.
really
Estoy muy
excited.
contenta de verlos a todos
But
el día de
today we'll be
hoy.
diving into the essential topic of how
Hoy, el día de hoy,
disaggregated
vamos a
data
profundizar sobre los
and data
fundamentos de la
justice can
equidad
help our
en el
organizations
compromiso
create
comunitario.
equitable outcomes. We'll
Que
explore ways
tengamos
to
unos,
better understand data
unos
in our
resultados
communities and to
equitativos.
understand needs that otherwise might go unseen,
Y
especially in
entendemos
rural,
necesidades que
mountain
quizás de otras
town,
maneras
and
no se puedan
Latinx
ver.
communities. So we'll briefly introduce ourselves as well, since we
Vamos a
have some new
presentarnos.
faces on the call today. So my name is
Tenemos
Dr. Leah Herbert.
nuevas
I've been in the
caras el día de
equity and
hoy.
inclusion space for many years.
Yo,
I'm
mi
also a
nombre
senior
es doctora
associate
Herbert, he
researcher
estado
as well.
en el
So
mundo de
I
la
love all
diversidad y
things
la
data,
equidad por muchos
and
años.
I am more than
Me encanta
excited
trabajar
to
con
be
data.
sharing and teaching today, but
Estoy
also to
muy
be
emocionada
teaching
de
in our
compartir con ustedes
follow-up
y
office
enseñarles el día
hours.
de
That'll
hoy.
be December 7th, and we hope to see you there.
Y quiero
I'll be your
conocerlos el
guide today
27 de
alongside my
diciembre.
amazing colleague, Dr. Galaxina Wright. I'll let
Y,
her
y
introduce
quiero
herself a little bit
presentarles
since
a
we
mi
have some new
increíble
faces
colega,
right now.
doctora Galaxina Wright.
Hi everyone, I'm
Hola a
Dr.
todos.
Galaxina Wright. It's nice to meet everyone.
Soy
If
la
you see a
doctora
little hand in
Galaxina
the
Wright.
screen, that is my daughter,
Mucho gusto en
that
conocerlos
she'll
a
be
todos.
passing off to my husband in just a few moments here. So
Tengo a mi hija conmigo en
it's
este
nice to
momento
meet
y ya
everyone.
pronto se la
I'm
voy a
an
pasar a
assistant
mi esposo.
professor. I'm at Nova Southeastern
Yo
University
soy
in Fort
una
Lauderdale,
profesora de la
Florida.
Universidad de
I'm
Nova en
also a
Florida.
licensed mental health counselor, as
También
well as
soy
I have
una
provided trainings
consejera
before in
de salud,
diversity, equity, and
licenciada.
inclusion. And I'm so excited to be here and to walk
También los
alongside
temas de
Dr. Herbert.
equidad y igualdad me
Awesome,
apasionan y estoy
awesome.
muy contenta de
And
estar el día
Dr.
de hoy
Wright
aquí.
also does really awesome conferences and teaching
También Dr.
presentations
Wright también hace unas conferencias
nationally
increíbles.
across the country.
También enseña a
And we're
nivel
hoping fingers
nacional.
crossed for internationally. So she's just an
Y
inspiration and
estamos
wealth of knowledge,
cruzando
and
los
really
dedos para que
grateful to
pueda
have her on
también
this
enseñar
ride
de forma
today.
internacional.
So ultimately, walking through our goals and objectives for today,
Y
we're really hoping
para
that you guys
ver
will have a
el
clear
objetivo de la
understanding of
presentación del
what
día de hoy,
data
vamos
desegregation
a hablar
is,
sobre
how to
qué es
develop
realmente la
inclusive data
desagregación de datos,
strategies, and how to
cuáles son
implement
los
statistical
desarrollos,
equity
desarrollar
into
estrategias de
your
datos
collection
inclusivos
process, but also empowering your staff members, your colleagues,
para
your
realmente
friends
cómo
and family to
empoderar tu
understand
personal.
data a bit more. And these goals are really
En
all
las
about
diferentes
empowering
organizaciones
you at the individual
y
contributor
realmente
level,
nuestro
but
propósito es
also
empoderarte a ti
impacting
como
larger
individuo para que tengas un impacto más grande en tu
executive leadership,
organización,
and hopefully
que
larger
y que
collective
tengas un rol de
empowerment at the
liderazgo
community
en tu
level.
organización.
Next slide. Awesome.
So one of the things that we've done with our groups and that we've continued to do
Una de las
is
cosas
just
que hemos hecho
basically
con
the
nuestro grupo
co-creation of group norms
Hemos
Otherwise,
creado unas
basically some
normas
guidelines to kind of keep the space still safe for everyone,
del
but also
grupo para
allowing
realmente
time for people to
promover un
share
ambiente
their
seguro
truth.
como
So,
tal.
the first, just going through them briefly, is to be mindful of airtime. Of course, we've got a short window here of only 2 hours, and that's a reminder to myself
La
and
primera
Dr. Herbert as
norma del
well.
grupo es que estén conscientes del
Because
tiempo
everything we
disponible,
talk about today, we could talk about for hours and hours,
porque
but
todo lo que
being
hablamos el día
mindful
de
of
hoy
the
lo podemos
time that we
hablar
have
en
and really making the
diferentes
most
temas
of
por
the moments that
horas.
we'll have later today. Being mindful of your truth is different from someone else's
Sé
truth.
consciente
We see this a
de lo
lot
que es
when
la
we think about
verdad, sé
differences
consciente
in
de la verdad
communities and
y la
subcommunities.
interconexión de
So being
diferentes
mindful of that when you're hearing
identidades,
other
la
people
diferencia
share
entre las
things.
comunidades y las
Also
diferentes
using I
subcomunidades.
statements, so speaking on how you feel,
También otra de las normas del
rather
grupo
than
es
on
que
behalf of
usa
others,
afirmaciones en
because
primera
oftentimes we
persona, como por
might
ejemplo yo.
misconstrue this sometimes, and making sure that we're really focusing on ourselves. And
Y
then
es que
also
realmente
just
nos
making
enfoquemos
sure
a
that
nosotros, que
when sharing
realmente
stories or
hacemos ese
sharing
tipo de
your
afirmaciones.
personal things, that we're
Las
being
historias personales deben
confidential of other
mantenerse
people's
confidenciales,
information.
comparten las
So really just kind
lecciones
of
y los
sharing the
temas
lessons or the themes that you've
aprendidos.
learned from maybe different interactions,
Las
rather
experiencias
than
de las
actually
personas no
naming
están
those
para debate.
individuals.
Podemos no estar de
And then of
acuerdo, pero
course
sin
we want to make
faltar
sure that we
el respeto.
gently disagree, but not disrespect. So making sure we're
Así
honoring
que
each
podemos
other's
no estar de
opinions,
acuerdo, pero no
and
faltar el
being
respeto como
respectful
tal.
of one another in the differing opinions as well. And if there's any other rules that you feel like would be
Y si
helpful
hay
for the
alguna
space,
otra regla
please
que
feel
usted
free to
cree
add
que
them in the
pueden
chat.
compartir, por favor la pueden poner en el chat.
Oh, Dr. Herbert, you're muted. I think you were trying to.
You.
Doctor
I was
Herbert,
like,
creo
thank
que
you so
estás
much. I was
el
looking at the
micrófono
screen to see
apagado.
if I see any additional rules added to the chat. I also
Solamente
wanted
quería
to
verificar si hay
later
alguna
on today,
otra
we'll
regla
talk
añadida en el
about
chat.
data sharing practices in the community.
También
What
quiero
are
compartir
some
sobre
helpful
cómo
pieces
compartir
to
la
have?
data en las
And a
diferentes
helpful piece that
comunidades.
I like is also the co-creation of group norms. So even what we
Y
just
una de
did
las
just
cosas que me
now,
gusta de
I
compartir
encourage
data es
you
la
to add
co-creación de
that
las
in
normas de
your
grupo.
presentation or your data set as we move into talking about inclusive communities.
Y
And
luego
that might
vamos a
be
hablar más
looking
al
like a
respecto,
co-creation of norms.
especialmente
That
cuando
might look
hablemos
like,
de las
I accept every person here as
comunidades
equally
y la
intelligent,
inclusividad en las
right?
comunidades.
Community knowledge and inclusion
El
is
conocimiento
honored,
de la
right?
comunidad.
We honor lived experience. We honor noticing who's included, who's excluded.
Y realmente
So
honrar
I think
realmente
things
que
like that
están
are
en la
really great
comunidad.
setting, and we encourage you guys to use that in some of our future activities when we think about
Y
data
también
sharing.
le exhorto a las personas que realmente puedan
So
estar
now we'll be
presentes.
moving into our learning segment. In this
Ahora
segment, we
vamos a
highly
hablar
encourage you guys
vamos a
to
hablar
take
sobre,
notes,
vamos a
to
movernos
break down
a la
terms.
sesión
This is
de
the time to really
aprendizaje.
dive in. Our
Este es el
presentation is
momento
going
de
to
realmente
hold
de
both
tomar
reading and
notas,
application.
pongan en
And
silencio
the
sus
application
teléfonos y
part, I will admit, will be a
notificaciones.
lot harder if you're some of the slides or some of the core elements you're not really writing down. So I encourage you to take out a book or take some notes as we're going along.
Quiero que realmente pues tomen unas notas mientras pasamos a esta siguiente sección.
So last time, a few familiar faces here remembers that
La
we
última
talked
vez
about
tengo a
the
muchas
more
personas
essential element of
caras familiares de la
real-world
última vez.
best practices for community engagement, right? We talked about some core essential pieces of moving from more passive levels of engagement to more
Hablamos
active
realmente
levels of
en
engagement.
diferentes temas,
We
por
talked
ejemplo,
about
de
core
algo más
elements of
pasivo a
trust
tener un
building,
rol más
most
activo.
importantly, understanding like trust framework and understanding elements related to trust takes time. It takes consistency.
Hablamos por eso sobre la
and,
confianza, que
really
la confianza
delving
toma
into that.
tiempo.
I do want to name some pieces that we discussed and highlighted.
Quiero realmente mencionar
Just
algunos
review them really
elementos
quickly. The first
que
one is
mencionamos la
letting
última
go
vez.
with the equality, equity, and justice. Understanding that framework can
Primero
be
es
tremendously important
igualdad
for
y
the work to come in terms of
justicia.
outreach and engaging with the community.
Y realmente
Understanding
cómo
that people
nos
may
podemos
fall in
relacionar
different
con la
mental
comunidad.
models, right? My dad may really be invested, and his frame of reference is truly
Equalidad,
equality,
equidad y
and then my
justicia.
reference is really justice, and my sister may be equity, right? Holding space for all those different mental models,
Y
but
realmente
really having the
crear
strength
espacio
to
para esos
move
diferentes
towards
modelos. ¿Cuál es
justice
la
with
igualdad?
time,
Puede ser
effort,
que
and
todo el mundo se
collaboration.
beneficie de la misma
The
manera.
next piece I
Equidad,
wanted to also
puede ser que
highlight
haya
was our awesome
necesidad en los
community
diferentes
engagement
grupos.
spectrum.
Y la
To
justicia
the
es que
naked eye,
todos
community engagement
se
is
pueda
often
acomodar
seen
a
in
los
the
tres de
form
la
of
misma manera.
outreach, support, or long-term collaborative interventions.
Y realmente lo
This can
importante
take
es
the
que haya
form of arts
apoyo,
activities. It can
colaboración
take
a
the
largo
form
plazo
of
como tal.
social and recreational events, or
que haya
maybe Dr. Wright's favorite
eventos
psychoeducation.
sociales
We'll be in June, we'll have a
recreacionales.
good time, but you're gonna learn
Vamos a
something at the
conocernos,
end of
vamos a
the
pasar tiempo
outreach, right?
juntos.
So I think a key piece that we really stressed in this
Y
framework
realmente la parte
model is
importante
that
que realmente en este
community
modelo
truly exists
enfatizamos
along a spectrum. Every element
que hay
from
diferente, hay un
informing, right,
espectro
providing communities with balanced and objective information,
diferente. Y realmente lo
programs
que
and
tenemos que hacer
services
es
and
proveer a las
wisdoms for
comunidades
choosing
con un
them.
balance
At
en
this
estos
level,
diferentes
communication looks like we're keeping you informed.
aspectos.
And in
¿Cómo
terms
nos
of
comunicamos?
tangibles, it might be fact
Hay
sheets,
diferentes,
newsletters,
puede
websites,
ser
and
como nos comunicamos,
analysis,
puede ser
right?
a través
So put
de
it in
algunas
chat or put some emojis if you're familiar with
boletines,
those. Like if
boletines que
you've
podamos
opened
a
a
través
posting
de
fact
correos
sheet, or you've
electrónicos.
gone to
¿Cómo podemos
a
hacer
farmer's
cosas que
market
se
and you've
conviertan
seen
en
a
acción?
newsletter given out, right? We're
¿Cómo podemos
learning
dar
more
algún,
about this organization in the
o aprender
community
más sobre la
and what they
organización
do. And I might take a
que ellos
picture of my
hacen?
selfie and send it to Dr. Wright, right? And then the next step we have is consulting.
Y
Inviting
el paso
feedback
que
on
tenemos es la
alternatives,
consultoría,
analysis, and decisions
analizar,
related to new programs and services, right?
buscar
So
diferentes
this one is a
programas
level
como
up,
tal.
and we think about
Este
a
es un nivel
communication
más hacia más
strategy being,
arriba,
we'll keep you informed, we're
va a
listening to
mantenerte
feedback and getting your
informado,
ideas
estamos
on concerns that are
estamos
influencing your
escuchando
decisions.
lo que
So now
realmente
we're
te
getting
tienes
into
que
some
ver para
more
poder
data,
tomar
right? Surveys,
decisiones.
focus groups,
Y luego llegamos a la
community
parte de
meetings,
de la
forums.
data,
I would even go as
de que
far to
tenemos
add
foros,
affiliate groups,
encuestas.
right? Like TTCF and some other affiliate groups, things of
Y
that
realmente
nature. Myself and Dr. Wright being a part of the
nos
affiliate group
unimos a
of Partnering
diferentes
Counseling
grupos, yo y por
Associations,
ejemplo
right?
y la doctora
Psychologists.
Wright.
All those are affiliate groups that you can
En
get
todos
more
estos
information,
grupos
learn
afiliados
more
nos pueden
about
proveer
more
más información
individuals that are impacted by your service, right?
y
Then we
realmente así
have
podemos
involvement,
alcanzar a
where we're
individuos que
really working
pueden
with
que están muy
community
impactados
members
por
to
nuestra
ensure
organización.
their aspirations and their concerns are considered at every stage of the program
Y que realmente
planning process
todas
and
tus
decision
aspiraciones y tus
making. And this
preocupaciones
one
se
sounds
consideren
easy,
en
but it's a
cada
bit
una de las
harder to
fases.
do. We're really
Es
ensuring
de las cosas más
feedback,
difíciles
we're
para
discussing
hacer.
alternatives, and we're
Vamos a
making
hablar
sure
sobre
that we're
diferentes
engaging community members
alternativas.
a little bit more closer as partners. So this might delve into some elements related to community organizing. And
Puede
as
ser que
Krista greatly
también se
mentioned,
relacione a
development related
organizar
to
eventos en la comunidad,
leadership development, right? So they talked about they
desarrollo de
hosted a
liderazgo,
leadership development workshop, right? That's getting
talleres de
really into
desarrollo de
development phase and that
liderazgo.
evolving phase. The last two, collaborating and empowering, we're really
La
working
última
with
dos, que es la
community members
colaboración y
as
la
opposed to
empoderación,
community members.
por ejemplo, es
In these
permitir a los
stages,
miembros
we're
que
really working
participen
in
en
terms of
diferentes
teamwork to implement creative solutions.
programas de planificación, de
Professionals are
toma de
also joining
decisiones y
in.
que los miembros de la
We are working
comunidad
with
activamente puedan
community
producir
partners, working
resultados,
with youth, working with community leaders.
trabajando con la
And
juventud,
we're really
trabajando con los
invested
diferentes
in
líderes
the voice of the community,
y que seas la voz de la
calm,
comunidad.
taking criticism even when it hurts.
Y que
Myself and
tenemos
Dr. Wright have been at the outreach and
críticas
community
aún cuando
tables where
duele.
an event was not taken well.
Por ejemplo,
Intervention that got
un
granted
evento
for 4
no
years
funcionó
came
bien,
back
no
like
estuvo
year
bien
1. So we have to
organizado
go
y
back
que
to
lo
the
tomes de
drawing
buena
board.
manera.
So things like that really open up the gates from a
Y
board
esto
perspective
realmente
and
abre las
executive perspective.
puertas para
How are your
poder
advisors?
realmente
Yes.
hablar más.
Is there a comment?
¿Hay algún comentario?
Sorry, did someone say something? I thought I heard something.
Yo creo
I
que
don't think so. I think it's okay.
Okay,
creo que
sorry.
alguien dijo algo, pero creo que
So
dice
the
Cristina
collaborating,
que no.
empowering, we're involving community members, and we're also
Y-
thinking about reflection of community.
Y también podemos
Is our
hablar sobre
community reflecting on
reflexionar.
our boards, right? Are we
En
using
nuestra
this
comunidad están
activity
reflexionando en
to
nuestras
look at our
juntas.
boards and see, are they reflecting our community? Are we
Y
doing
realmente,
that
y si
work
están
on our governing
reflexionando en nuestra
boards as well?
comunidad.
Are we considering that in terms of leadership and future
Estamos
partnerships?
considerando eso en
So
cuanto al
it's a really
liderazgo.
great framework. We'll definitely come
Es
back to it a
realmente
few times.
un
And this will be
espectro muy
key in
completo
developing your organization's
y es realmente esto muy
DEI
bueno
action
para
plan,
poder
which we'll be working on in January.
desarrollar
By understanding
estos
these,
programas
you can have
de
really
diversidad,
core
equidad e
metrics,
igualdad en tu
think hard,
organización.
spectrum goals that you can lead to, and you'll have a communication element tied
Y
to it.
una vez que tengas estas diferentes partes del espectro, puedes realmente tener esa parte de comunicación
Awesome.
para poder.
So now we have a bit of a fun activity. I'm going to need
Ahora tenemos un
everyone to
poco
use the
de una
chat. I would
actividad
love to see some hand
divertida.
raises. But this is a really fun activity, and we're going to walk into actually a classic example to show why.
Voy
just
a realmente
attributing data
hablar
can be
sobre
really
un ejemplo muy clásico.
So I have a scenario for you guys.
Tengo un escenario para ustedes.
Imagine that you
Imagínate,
are choosing a hospital based
estás
on
eligiendo un
mortality.
hospital
And we have here a table of 2 hospitals, Hospital A
tenemos
and
una tabla
Hospital
de
B.
dos,
We also have on
dos
the
tablas, una
y-axis indices
hospital A y
related to
hospital
death.
B.
related to those that have survived and related
Tenemos
to
aquí
those
también una
so we
información
can
de
see
las
that
personas que han
hospital
muerto y las
A
personas que
has
han
its data, we see
sobrevivido.
hospital B has its data.
También
At first
el
glance, you know,
hospital
the
A tiene su
hospitals
data y el
appear
hospital B
very
tiene su
similar,
data.
and you know, we see the totals are different. But
Vemos
I'm
que
going
el
to
total
pause
de
here a
ambos es
little bit,
diferente.
and I want you guys to put in the chat, which
Y quiero
hospital are you choosing?
quiero que ustedes pongan en el chat
So take
qué
your
hospital
time, give you
ustedes
guys like a minute.
eligieran si estuvieran en la búsqueda de buscar un hospital de acuerdo a la información que está presentada en esta data.
Okay. And feel free to put Y as well if you want to. Okay, I see B,
También
a
puedes
lower
poner
percentage of death.
eh,
Interesting.
la
I see
razón.
A. Okay.
Muchas personas pusieron B porque
Okay,
tienen
there's
un
some-
% más bajo de muertes. Algunas personas pusieron
I like
A.
what I'm seeing. I like what I'm seeing.
Me gusta lo que estoy viendo, me gusta lo que estoy
So
leyendo.
far, it's about half and half, it looks like, between
Por,
half A
por
and
ahora
half
es como la mitad. La mitad eligieron A y la mitad eligieron B.
Okay, Jennifer, I love your point. We need to do more learning before making a decision. That's a
Alguien
really
dijo,
good
Jennifer, me gusta lo que acabas de decir,
But just in this
necesito tener más
hypothetical,
información para tomar una
you
decisión.
know, if you had to choose. Okay, okay. Well, thanks. I see it's 50-50. I also see some
Creo que
people
realmente
that
el
would choose option
50%.
NA. I will not be choosing a hospital today, no matter how kindly
Y
you
una de las
ask.
personas dijo, yo no voy a elegir
But
ningún
yeah,
hospital el día de hoy.
you know, in choosing this, we're really looking deeply at these two hospitals and thinking through
Y
it.
realmente en elegir, estás
By
viendo
these two
los dos
different
hospitales.
elements, it's important
Y
to
realmente
know
hay
that when we
diferentes
move to the
elementos.
next slide, we see some interesting pieces.
Por
Now, we
ejemplo, si
know
vamos
from
a
the
la
two
próxima
hospitals just on
diapositiva,
face
vemos realmente
value
información
that Hospital
interesante.
A has a 3% in terms of its surgery patients, and Hospital B
Por
loses
ejemplo,
only
el hospital
2%.
A
And
tiene
that's when we kind
3%
of
en
compare
cuanto
the
a
bottom
cirugía.
to the top. But when we move to
Tiene el
the
3% de esos pacientes de cirugía,
disaggregated
mientras que
piece
el
that we're
hospital B
seeing now in
tiene el
front of us,
2% de cirugía.
disaggregated, think of it almost like a meal we're having at a restaurant.
Imagínate que esta data agregada es como una cena que estás teniendo en un restaurante.
Or make sense of this pesto pasta. So when we dig
Pero
more
una
deeply
ensalada
and
César o una ensalada de
get to
pesto.
learn more of the ingredients, it goes back to what Jennifer said.
Pero
Dr.
esto
Herbert,
realmente tienes que
thanks
ver
for
cuáles
this
son los
hypothetical, and I
ingredientes. Es
need
como
more
lo que dijo
information.
Jennifer.
So when we disaggregate and we pull
Cuando
the
estamos
data
agregando
out,
esta
we look at the
información,
patients with good condition, and we
también
look at
vemos
the
a los
patients with
pacientes
bad
que tienen
condition.
una buena
We
condición.
have this interesting similar data points, the death,
Y también
survival, and the total.
tenemos esta información
And we
similar.
see here that, you know, Hospital A has its data, Hospital B, and then vice versa for
Vemos que
patients in bad
el
condition.
hospital A tiene su data y
Now
el
I want to
hospital
put
B
the
tiene
same
su data.
question to you. Are
Y,
you going to the same hospital?
y ahora te hago la pregunta a
Are you
ti.
going
¿Irías
to the
tú al
same
mismo
hospital?
hospital?
Okay, I see Sophia saying no, I'll go to Hospital A. Okay.
Yo veo que Sofía dijo que no y voy a ir al hospital A.
Okay, I see Tammy, I'm going to Hospital A.
También veo que Tammy dijo que iba a ir al hospital A.
Okay, awesome.
Fantástico.
Okay. Okay. And this is what researchers mean when we say that data
Y esto
does
es lo que
not always
realmente
give a
los
full picture.
investigadores
We
dicen
can
cuando
have
hablamos
one
realmente de la
sense
data.
that on face value, right, it really looks like B is the way to go, things of that
Cuando
nature.
realmente vemos los
And
datos
then when
así,
we kind of disaggregate and we're pulling patients maybe with conditions, patients and not so
realmente
good
vemos una
conditions,
información,
and we're able
pero
to
cuando
compare,
agregamos
we
la
get a
data,
lot more
desagregamos la data, que quiere decir que
Additionally,
desglosamos
when
la
we think
data,
about community outreach and
en
inclusion in our
diferentes
data,
porciones, vemos
this
la
makes
información de
me pay
diferente
attention to
manera.
what you're talking about. Before, I'm kind of like, okay, you know, survival rates and two
Antes,
hospitals. I
realmente
don't really
estaba
know how
viendo,
I feel
sí,
about
mira,
this. I know when I look at this,
el
I'm like,
porciento de
oh, wow, you
sobrevivencia
know,
es
which one
tanto,
do I fall in? Which one
pero
do I choose for my
quizás
dad?
tengo
Which
que
one do I
ver
choose for my mom? All these interesting
cuál es la
pieces
que
and
realmente voy
questions
a
and
asistir de acuerdo a
curiosities
la otra
are coming to
información.
mind. And guess what? I'm walking up to your org and I'm like, I want to learn more. Can you sign me
Y
up?
realmente
Do you
cuando
guys
veo
need more
esta información digo, realmente quiero tener
Things
más
like this
información al
really show
respecto.
the power of disaggregated data.
Y esto realmente
And this is a
muestra el
really
poder
fun
de la data
example you usually
desagregada.
see in your kind of advanced statistics class here and there
Y todas las
around
cosas
the
que ves
importance of
en la clase
disaggregated
avanzada de
data and a little
estadística,
bit of the element that data is just one part of the picture, right? It's the way in
realmente
terms of how
también
it's
vemos
presented.
que la data es realmente un
But when we
pequeño
break it
elemento de
down,
toda
we end up seeing some other
el
interesting,
panorama como
fascinating
tal.
factors.
Y que hay otros factores también que tienen que ver, que están involucrados en esta decisión.
Awesome. So speaking of, we just saw some interesting data related to community outcomes and things of that nature.
Hablando, pues
And before
hemos
moving
visto
forward and
datos
talking
interesantes
all
sobre
fun
los
things
resultados de la
about
comunidad.
disaggregated data and data justice, I wanted to
Hablamos
kind of
sobre
pause here
data
and share a little
desagregada,
bit about
justicia de
data
data.
capacity in terms
Ahora
of
vamos a hablar
communities
sobre la
and things we
capacidad
can
de datos.
consider. I remember during our last training, we got an
Yo
interesting
recuerdo en el
comment
último
that was
entrenamiento
related to communication, right? Like
y
Dr.
hicieron
Herbert,
un
this is a
comentario
good
sobre
start, but what do we
comunicación.
do when there's a bit of communication gap and we're not
¿Y
seeing
qué
some of
realmente
these
hacemos
things?
cuando hay
Well, the first element that I highly encourage
no hay
individual
suficiente
contributors,
comunicación?
organizations at large, board members, and executive leadership to always consider is enabling resources, access to data, and then access to help with data, right? So
Y lo
access
que
to
realmente
data,
los líderes de la
thinking
comunicación
about
cuando
data
sucede
sharing
esto, cuando le den
agreements,
información a la data,
open data platforms,
que
public
que
websites,
tengan
and homes of
información a
business.
la data, que
And we're also
tengan
thinking about the way that we
plataformas de datos
share data to
abiertas,
community.
sitios
So that
web
might be
públicos
fact sheets, and
que
that might be
puedan facilitar el
analysis
acceso
on
a conjuntos de
certain
datos
topics. But
completos.
another piece that's really important to
Pero otra
consider
pieza que es muy
is access to
importante
help with data. And assistance
es
can
el
be
acceso a la
technical
ayuda con los datos.
workshops, it
La
can be
ayuda puede ser
trainings,
consistida
it
en
could be
programas de
one-on-one
asistencia
coaching,
técnica, talleres de
but access
formación
to help with
o
data
asesoramiento
can also
individual o
explainer videos, it can be
individualizado,
written guidance,
pero
and
también pueden
also
ser forma de
file
recursos
documentation
estadísticos
and
como
meetings.
videos,
I actually recently
orientación
worked with a
escrita y
nonprofit
documentación de
that
los
was hoping
expedientes.
to clean up and improve their data governance.
Por
And
ejemplo,
one of
cómo
our
limpiar
key
la data y
goals
realmente
within
mejorar la
what we saw
data
in our
del
action
gobierno,
plan is improving
tener
the
un plan de
final
acción.
documentation, right? How often
Es
are we looking
importante
for a
tener esta
survey or we're looking for
documentación.
a data set? We're like, oh my God, what do we
¿Qué
name it?
tanto, qué tan
Where's the
pronto hacemos
address?
la
It's all over the
encuesta?
place. And sometimes even breaking down of how we name our folders, how the folders are organized. Are
Y que
we
realmente ver
organized
cómo
by
estos archivos
subject
están
area or our
organizados.
core projects or our core
Están
programs? So things
separados
like that
por
would be
diferentes
incredibly
proyectos.
helpful for
Esto también
including
ayuda
that
con
data.
la data
Another
comunitaria.
piece that we should consider
Otra
from an
parte que es
organizational
importante en la
perspective is
organización
curiosity culture, right?
es
Like, are
la
we using
cultura de
data
la
as a tool
curiosidad.
for learning and
Utilizar los
innovation?
datos como herramientas de
Additionally,
aprendizaje e
in terms of
innovación.
consideration for additional things that an organization can do, is
Y
also
es como
considering
considerar
data
diferentes
routine,
cosas que la organización puede
reviewing
hacer.
data early and often and guiding
Es
decisions
revisar
to
la
those
data
sources. So in terms of some of my
con
early work
anterioridad,
I've done in the past,
asignar recursos a
some
la
really big changes I've seen that's really helped orgs is even having, we have our bi-weekly meetings or our all
Por ejemplo,
hands
tenemos nuestra
meetings,
reunión
right? So in certain
cada
IT
2 veces a la
circles.
semana,
But having a data meeting either once a month or bi-weekly
pero realmente
can be
tener esa
incredibly
información de
helpful
data quizá
and
una vez a la
also give
semana,
and
una vez al mes,
empower
perdón.
program leads, outreach,
Esto
community
realmente
workers,
empodera
board members,
a
and
los líderes del programa,
volunteers, right?
a los
Who,
voluntarios,
with permissions and certain NDAs and
pues,
everything
claro,
signed,
que
can
puedan
really
tener
aid in that
permiso para
data
utilizar
collection
esta
and
data.
data routine process. And then at the community at large, we'll talk about this a little bit more. We can
Bien,
really
en cuanto a la
encourage
comunidad
learning
como tal,
communities,
hablamos
cultivating
de forma
relationships
colectiva, hablamos al
not
respecto.
only with us as like the data collectors,
Y no
but also
solamente
the
con
community
nosotros,
at
que somos los
large, which may
que
be
somos los que
users, and
recopilamos la
encouraging
data,
new ways of thinking and data
es
capacity.
realmente pues,
We can
cultivar
also
relaciones entre
greatly
entre
inform
usuarios,
collective planning,
que
right? As we
tengamos
come to Q4 and we're really thinking, what
data
does,
colectiva, compartir los
maybe
datos
summer
como
and
tal.
winter look like for the year to come? We're really thinking about some of those core
Y
tools.
realmente, ¿cuáles
And
son las
lastly,
herramientas
data sharing,
principales como
right?
tal?
Developing trust of sharing data within the bounds of
Y realmente
protecting
compartir la data y de
confidentiality.
forma que
One of
de
the resources that
confianza.
I have in you guys' one pager is a really great read, and it's called Investing in Data Capacity
Hay
for
algo que les
Community
quiero,
Change.
un
I'm
libro que les quiero
nonprofit
compartir es que se
side.
llama
And
Invertir
it's
en la
such a good
capacidad de la
read of
data.
really thinking through what this might look at the capacity building level from a
Y
community
esto es
standpoint.
muy importante porque habla sobre
Now
la
we will hop
capacidad
to
de cómo construir esto de una manera más grande.
So
And
as
Dr. Herbert, can we, oh, sorry. Can
Go
we
ahead,
just
I'm sorry.
pause and just make sure, ask if
Sure.
anyone has questions?
Sure.
Podemos pausar y ver si alguien
Sure.
tiene realmente alguna pregunta.
Thanks. So I know that was kind of a lot. Just want to make sure.
Solamente sé
Nobody
que
in the
esto
group
fue
has a
mucha
question for
información y
you.
solamente quiero saber si alguien tiene alguna pregunta.
Okay. Thanks for letting me interrupt.
That's a good idea though, just do a pulse check, make sure.
Mhm.
Just
Y
in
eso es una
case.
buena idea que realmente
So if
pueda
you guys do have
tomar un
questions
receso si
throughout,
tienen alguna
definitely put
pregunta.
them in the chat. And
Si tienen
we'll
alguna
make sure to
pregunta la
address them
pueden
out loud
escribir en
as
el
well.
chat.
Yeah, the chat, raise your hand,
Yes.
Puede levantar la mano.
all ears. So,
So as Dr. Herbert shared earlier about disaggregated
Como
data,
Dr.
when we
Herbert
talk about
compartió
disaggregated
anteriormente
data, what we're
sobre
referring
la
to is
data.
basically breaking down a large data set into a smaller one. As you
Y
saw with the
realmente lo que
example with the
podemos hacer es
hospital, had larger data, and then
desglosar
you
la
go to the
data
next slide
grande
and
en
it broke it
datas
down even
pequeñas.
further. So when we break down
O sea, por
data sets
ejemplo,
even
se
further,
componen en
this
grandes
helps
conjuntos de datos en
uncover
grupos más pequeños
trends
y
or patterns,
específicos.
or maybe even some
Esto
barriers
nos
that we're
permite
missing
identificar
that
tendencias,
sometimes can be
patrones,
revealed.
disparidades
It
dentro de
also will
poblaciones
sometimes show us
específicas
disparities that might go unnoticed
y
if
quizá
we're
también
not
alguna
paying attention to
disparidad que
them, if we're
realmente
just
no nos
looking
demos
at the
cuenta en el
large data
momento.
set instead of the smaller data set.
Y
So
esto realmente
sometimes
se
an
nota en los
example or
datos,
kind
en
of
las
an
listas
example would
pequeñas de
be
datos
a school
y no
with
realmente
a
se ven los
high
datos grandes.
graduation rate. They might have lower rates for subpopulations. In looking at maybe even grade level, looking at maybe gender, maybe looking at race or ethnicity. And so
Por
when we
ejemplo,
disaggregate the data, we're able to
cuando
look
realmente
and
desagregamos
understand
la data,
different
podemos ver
challenges that
diferentes,
other groups might be facing, as opposed to just looking
en
at
los
the
diferentes
overall
grupos,
larger
nos
data.
podemos
So
ver
some things that you might
diferentes
want to think about
opciones.
are some specific groups within your community
Y
that
quiero
could
que ustedes piensen
benefit
en los
from looking at
diferentes
a
grupos de
closer
sus
look
comunidades
at the data.
y en relación a esta data en particular.
I don't know
definitely.
if there's anything Dr.
And-
Herbert can add to that.
Yeah, and like if we pause on this slide, if we look to the right, we see here that we have examples of two questions. If we go back one slide, sorry, we have example of two survey questions, right?
Si vamos
Identify
a la presentación, tenemos ejemplos de dos
If we
encuestas.
start with the first one,
Digamos, si
on the
empezamos con
right,
la primera,
we see that
a
we
la
have
derecha,
circle bubble boxes. In research, we call this radio boxes.
tenemos,
And
por
this design
ejemplo,
forces users
puedes
to choose
elegirlo en los
one
diferentes
choice.
círculos que
And
le llaman
sometimes it can make our
burbujas.
users feel a bit dehumanized, right? When they're forced to make one choice, when they may be
Y a veces
able to
realmente
pick the
cuando
perfect one. And it may
exigimos a las
not totally
personas que
grasp
elijan
their
solamente
full
uno,
potential
hacemos sentir a las
disadvantages.
personas que
I
no
know
son
for me, I would feel a
muy
little bit in a
humanas.
box where I can click more than one, but
Yo
what
sé,
if
por
that
ejemplo, en
doesn't
mi
just happen
caso,
to
ella
me?
dice que ella
It kind
realmente
of puts
puede
me in a box and
elegir más de
prevents,
uno, no
larger swath
necesariamente
of
quiere
data. What I
limitarse a
highly
una cajita.
recommend is moving more towards the left, where we have
Pero yo
check
realmente
boxes, and users
lo
can
que
click
recomiendo
more
es que
than one
ponga, por
option,
ejemplo, vamos
and
a ver
this
a la
allows
opción de la
users to
izquierda.
have multiple
Y ahí dice,
choices,
por ejemplo, que
multiple
puedes
voices heard.
elegir todas
I'm a big
las que
fan of also
aplican.
having open
Solamente
responses
no
and
tienes
some
que elegir
multiple
una.
choices.
En vez de
That's
un
way if we
círculo, tener
miss something,
un
if
cuadrado,
sometimes people are wanting to add another piece of it or
también
something of the
tener una
sort,
opción para tú
you
añadir
can get a
algo que
lot
realmente no
more
está
in
escrito
depth
o no
in that
no hay
area.
una opción
And
para seleccionar.
I actually was talking to a colleague who identifies as African American and Native American, and we
Por
were
ejemplo, yo
talking
estaba
about
hablando con una colega que se
segregation
considerada
questions, and she was like,
africana-americana y
I
también
like the open box
nativoamericana.
because she says with her, she also likes to put her tribe and a bit more information
Y ella
besides just
pone
Native
en su
American.
cajita, ella
So
dice que también le gusta poner de qué
it's really
tribu ya
interesting
viene.
of the agency you can give your community members and even staff members at large that are maybe doing a staff survey pulse to further learn more about
Y esto es
just
muy importante, porque cada vez que ella pone eso, te da la oportunidad de aprender de tus colegas de dónde vienen, de una forma interna. Si es que quieren compartir esta información de forma voluntaria. Y esto se anima a las organizaciones realmente de obtener la data de las diferentes organizaciones.
And then externally with our community partners as
Y
well as
también
the
esto nos
community
ayuda a tener la
comments
suficiente
or
información
questions
externamente
on
con nuestra
this,
comunidad.
slide before we hop to the next?
¿Alguna pregunta en cuanto a esta diapositiva antes que vayamos a la próxima?
Awesome. We can keep going.
Ok,
So for the
podemos.
next slide, it's just reiterating some really core pieces.
Para la
Just
próxima
we don't
diapositiva,
one
que esta
size fits all.
información solamente
And
reiterar
understanding that, you know, with disaggregated data, we're
la
really
información, la
able to
definición de
build,
qué son datos
some
desagregados.
challenges.
¿Cuáles son los
Another
retos
example
como
I
tal?
wanted to give as well is oftentimes what we saw on the left where we had like Hispanic and Latino as one category.
Por ejemplo, otro ejemplo que quiero poner, por ejemplo, cuando tenemos hispanos o latinos como una categoría, también les gustaría desglosarlo por país de origen,
further ethnic subgroups such
o
as
por
Cuban,
ejemplo,
Colombian, the list goes
si
on
son
and on.
cubanos,
And then you
colombianos,
can also ask the ethnicity question and
y
also
también puedes
further
poner la parte de
disaggregate by elements,
de la
such
etnia
as
a la que
generation
pertenecen,
status,
o por
such as
ejemplo,
geographic location, such as
la ubicación
primary language, things
geográfica,
of that sort. And those can be really
estado
interesting,
generacional.
strong data points to help inform
Estos
your
son idioma
outreach,
principal, país de
interventions and
origen.
work that you do
Y
with
estas
the
son diferentes
community, as well as
intervenciones que te
program
ayudan a
innovations,
entender un
right?
poco
And we
quiénes
talk
son de
a lot
comunidad.
about, you know, having resources inclusive linguistically, but are we doing a good job of capturing linguistic
Y esto realmente nos
differences
ayuda
outside
realmente a
of
tener
maybe
diferentes
from
recursos y
ethnicity,
saber si
other
estamos realmente haciendo un buen
subsectors?
trabajo
So
utilizando
it's
esta data
important to help
desagregada.
and capture that data to get that knowledge.
Y para realmente, al tener esta data,
Pause
pues realmente
here
podemos
for
tener más información.
questions.
El otro ejemplo que ya puse anteriormente es que los altos índices
So I
generales de
did want to move to
graduación
this piece
pueden
in that
ocultar
everyone
bajo
on this
índices de grupos
call,
específicos de
all
estudiantes.
work in the nonprofit space, we work, you know, with community members. And something I wanted to kind of talk about as well
Yo sé que,
is
por ejemplo,
data
cuando
is
trabajamos en organizaciones sin fines de lucro,
but are we necessarily using it in the best way?
tenemos esta información, esta data, pero realmente lo estamos utilizando de la mejor manera. Y vamos a ver esta tabla.
Scale meta study that looked at 50 nonprofits in the workforce development space. They
Esto habla
interviewed and
sobre
they surveyed
50
these nonprofits,
organizaciones sin
and
fines
they
de
were
lucro
kind of
y los
looking at
diferentes
their
programas de
willingness
trabajo
to
que
not only
tienen.
collect this important and vital disaggregated data, but to act on it and move into change
Y no
management.
solamente es recopilar la información, sino actuar en esta información, actuar. ¿Qué vamos a hacer con esta data como
And I think
tal?
sometimes there's such that gap between the theory of like, this sounds good, but what is it, Dr. Herbert, what does it
Y
look like in
realmente hay
action? What
hay
are
un
those gaps?
abismo
So for this
realmente entre
study,
la data que
when
se
they
ve,
asked them the
se ve
question,
bien,
do you
pero
collect
también la
data
data
on
que realmente,
race or
pues,
ethnicity on
¿qué vamos a
participants?
hacer con esa
100%
información?
said yes. We collect that data, it's broken down,
Recopilar esa
yes,
data.
we collect it. And then when they ask them, do you disaggregate the data for
Uno
participation?
obtiene la información, ¿qué vas a hacer? ¿Desagregar la data? ¿Desagregar la data como tal?
We drop from 100 all the way to 50%.
Bajamos
And that's in
de
terms of
100
when they're
a un
collecting data for
50% y esta es
And
parte de
then we also
desagregar
see
la
that
data. Lo que
there's
quiere decir
major
es
gaps in
desglosar
terms
la
of
data en
occasional
diferentes
and
grupos
even
pequeños.
never at 10%. When
Y
they
luego
ask these
bajamos a un
folks again,
10%.
do you also disaggregate the same data for outcomes in terms
Por
of
ejemplo,
finding needs and
ella
gaps in
del 100%
services
de la data
and
que se
improving
recopiló, la
that
desagregaron en
impact
4
on the
grupos
community
por
spectrum?
participación bajo un
Guess what? We drop
50%.
again.
Y ella pregunta
So
si
we're
en
not
la
only at
segunda
50, we're dropping to
parte de
30%. And we see here that
la información vamos a
these are
desagregar
major
la data,
gaps in terms
esa
of
misma data
the
en
data
4 puntos
collected
adicionales.
and its
Esta
impact
desagregar la data
on the
por
program,
resultado.
on outcomes, on community at large.
Y
And
esto
this is what I
realmente,
mean in the
¿cuáles son los
sense of
resultados
really
en
moving
grande de la
from
comunidad?
theory and action of, oh,
Y esta es la
I filled out,
diferencia,
here's
esto
the
es lo que
survey,
diríamos de
here's
la
the
teoría
email
a la
chain,
acción.
here's the post session survey we did.
Por
As
ejemplo,
to,
es
hey, did you look
la
at
encuesta
that? And did you disaggregate
del
for
servicio
outcomes? Are you connecting
después
that
de la
data
presentación
to
que
your
tenemos.
program and your organization goals?
Porque, por ejemplo,
So
ella dice
things
que,
like that is
que ella va a
incredibly
hacer una
important,
encuesta
and
antes de la
I'm here to highlight
presentación
the importance
y
of
con esa misma
collecting
data
this
va a
data
tener una
at
encuesta
the
después de la
organizational
presentación. Es un
non-profit
ejemplo
level.
de cómo desagregar la data en otros puntos también, en otros grupos pequeños.
So another example that I wanted to give to make this a bit more real is many of us
Otro
are
ejemplo que
familiar
quiero
with
decir es cómo
census
hacer esto
data.
de una forma
And
más
as of recent, there was
real.
some articles, some 2020 and 2021 articles that actually critique the census, and they found that
Por ejemplo, que hay
Pacific
artículos
Islanders
del
were
2020-2021 que
themselves in the
realmente
pandemic,
criticaron el
and
censo
that
como
the
tal.
COVID-19 data oftentimes lumped Pacific Islanders with Asian Americans.
Y por ejemplo,
But
la data,
in
el
states where they were separated out,
COVID-19,
there
ellos
was
unieron a los
differences
habitantes de
for
las islas del
Pacific
Pacífico
Islander
con los
communities. And they
asiáticos
basically weren't
americanos.
getting services
Y
because
por eso era que no
they
estaban
were
recibiendo
masked,
servicios como tal.
underneath the Asian American community. So
Bajo,
we talk about the
bajo
importance of it,
la
and
categoría de
we'll
asiáticos
have the
americanos.
definition of it. Dr. Herbert shares some of the survey best practices. Dr. Wright gives the high school example of this is what you need to do. But we also
Han
see
hablado,
there's
por ejemplo, de
rural
diferentes ejemplos,
implications
cuáles
of
son las mejores
incomplete, right?
prácticas, qué es lo que tenemos que
Communities
hacer.
get ignored. Services don't
Muchas veces de
get
las
provided.
comunidades han sido
And
ignoradas,
there's a true silencing of sorts that can happen because it's almost like a silent population that no
Y
one's
realmente
going
esto
to.
realmente puede
They're
pasar
doing the
porque realmente han
surveys,
aislado
they're
estas
doing
poblaciones
the
como
data
tal.
collection, but they're just not being heard because they're not being captured. So I
Y
wanted to share that
realmente
because
se
of some of the
sienten que no han sido
quiet
escuchados estas organizaciones
implications
porque
of it.
no se ha capturado la data como tal.
Awesome. So I know we talked your ear off for a little bit, but now we want to hop to a really fun and interactive part of the presentation. We
Yo
really
sé que
want
hemos hablado de
to
data
walk
como tal,
through
pero vamos a hablar sobre una parte
what
divertida de la
are your
presentación.
challenges with data collection? And I would
¿Cuáles
even
son
add in here
tus
anything
desafíos
that
con
we
la
just talked
recopilación de
about. I know
datos?
we talked
¿Cuáles
about
son tus
some
dificultades?
interesting
¿Cuáles son
things related
oportunidades?
to disaggregating data, the importance of doing it, even interest around data, right? I see how everybody in the chat was like, oh,
Y no
I've changed mine.
solamente
Oh my
esto,
gosh,
solamente el
this is
interés como
interesting.
la de la data como
How do
tal.
we do that data storytelling? How do we
Cómo
collect
realmente
data in better ways?
contamos
What
la
are our
historia a través de la data que
opportunities as
obtenemos.
an org? So what I would like us to do is to
Lo que
go
me
into
gustaría
breakout
hacer,
rooms for around 20 minutes.
vamos a estar
Our
en los
goal will
diferentes
be
grupos por
to
20
consider
minutos
some of these questions
para considerar estas preguntas
with obviously
que sean
proper
vulnerables,
confidentiality of sorts. Feel
que
free to
realmente
share,
sean,
some
lo
areas
que
in terms of
compartes sea
challenges
de
that
una
you've
forma
experienced
confidencial.
or org-wide
¿Cuáles
have
son tus
experienced.
experiencias?
And our goal for this time
Y
is really to
nuestra
consider what
meta
three things are we
objetivo
learning in terms of improving our data collection.
es cómo
Any
realmente
surprises?
podemos
Are you
mejorar
hearing
la
other people
recopilación de
share, like,
datos.
that's something I would like to try, or
Y
that's
eso,
something that's
y
interesting,
quizás
or
pueda
maybe
decir
share
quizás
it
algo
with
que
a
te
wider
gustaría
group.
tratar.
And then what's one additional curiosity that you have?
Y otra
Sometimes
cosa,
we do these presentations.
¿cuál es la data
The
colectiva de
curiosity can even
curiosidad?
be, Dr. Herbert, where do I start? The
Por
curiosity
ejemplo,
can
simplemente
even
decir,
be,
Dr. Herbert, ¿dónde puedo comenzar?
this sounds great, but I'm nervous about data. No, the
Esto
nervousness is
suena
my
increíble,
curiosity,
pero
right? So
realmente
the
estoy
list goes
nerviosa, no
on
sé
and
cómo
on. So we
comenzar.
will go into breakout rooms.
Vamos a estar en
And
diferentes grupos
each of the
pequeños.
breakout rooms will also have a facilitator. So you
Cada
will
uno de
have
esos
one of
grupos va a tener un
the course team
facilitador.
members in there that will be helping
Vamos a poner uno de
guide
los
and
miembros en
encourage
esos grupos.
conversation and encouraging people to share and things of that notion, and
Es
really
para
getting some
realmente
good
exhortar a
insight
las
that
personas
we
que
can all
puedan
go on to
compartir
later
su
share in
conocimiento.
our large group. So
Y
we'll
y
go
luego
in breakout
que
rooms
terminemos los
throughout
20
this
minutos,
event,
podemos compartir eso
and
en el
we'll
grupo
also have our
grande.
facilitators in there. Myself and Dr. Wright will also be popping in as well.
Y también
So you'll be seeing
esta
our
servidora, la doctora Herbert y la doctora Wright, van a estar entrando en los diferentes grupos.
Okay. Awesome. I'm so happy to see everyone back. I was so inspired by the rooms. I took notes. You guys had me in session, like I was in class. So I really appreciate it. And I think we have some really helpful points to kind of discuss and problem solve in real time. I do want to hear from at least 3 people if we can popcorn. what came up for you in the group? Any 3 things learned, any surprises, any aha moments where you were nodding and was like, me too, I'm not the only one. So I did want to kind of open the space for that. If we can have like 3 quick share outs.
I mean, I could share out for our group, and I think this is something that we often hear at the foundation when we're collecting data is sort of the interpretation and the trust of the data, and especially if we maybe don't trust the sample size of the data or who was sampled. That was something that was brought up in our group. I think another thing that was brought up in our group is how do we get more people to participate, and how do we reach populations of focus, to steal the ton of Chucky's word, reach people better that we're trying to serve. And I think what we really are like hungry for is like how to use these outcomes as a community. And I'm hoping we can dive into that a little bit deeper.
Anyone else? Thank you. Those are helpful things. I wrote down some of them.
I would love to share if that's possible. I feel like a broken record because we've had other meetings, but for ours, I was in the Spanish preferred group, and it's always about like the translations and whether or not these surveys are created with cultural competency in mind, and how often that is not the case, and how a lot of surveys are created for a specific segment of the population and then redistributed to other populations of focus or communities of focus that might not, the questions or the ways that they're phrased might not resonate. And one thing that came up in our group too is fear with some of the questions, specifically with like race questions or ethnicity questions for some of our groups that might be undocumented or whatnot, that impacts. And I'm not trying to get political, but how much harder that is going to become now. And it's so hard because that's like systemic. How can I change your fear of deportation? Even if I tell you a million times, like, no, it's fine, you can answer this survey, there's always going to be people that are not going to trust that, and how we need to take that into account when we're reviewing data, because we're talking about people, and people are in numbers. And
yes,
we can try our best, but still people are in numbers, and we cannot just go by numbers when we're talking about people.
I completely agree. That's actually one of the sections we have, like, how do we balance, data privacy, and then also, true concerns, related to, legal status and things of that nature. So I think that's a really good consideration to have. And I think also the importance of diverse forms of data, right? So it might be, you can skip this question. It might be NA. It might be a version of the survey where it's all response, we've done more so with children, but we've done surveys where it's art form, so there's a lot of interesting elements to consider as well. I see another hand raised. I think Denise.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to echo what Andrea said. In our breakout room, we also talked about the difference between translation and language access, which a lot of the times, if there's a survey and it's been translated into Spanish, it's not necessarily accessible to the population that we're trying to reach. And often the people who are distributing the survey have to do a little bit more of explaining, because people are like, well, what does this question mean? Like, what is this word? Like, I don't really understand. So yeah, I just wanted to echo that. And also, we also talked about sensitive questions, or questions that people sometimes find a little bit invasive. And so people in our breakout rooms also talked about how that's often a barrier, because they ask something like, people are not comfortable with answering their race or gender, things of that sort. So yeah, not to repeat everything Andrea said, but we did focus on the same issues, it seems like.
No, thank you so much for sharing that. I completely agree. It's an important consideration to have. I also think Dr. Wright's case study that she'll share a little bit will be helpful with that. Sensitive data is so real. It's just across multiple segments. And Dr. Wright has been able to work with folks impacted by joblessness, folks using a lot of social services, and it can be a bit tricky putting income, something as simple like, oh, putting one's income down, like, that's if I put my income down, will I lose my benefits, right? So we've even had, like, you think about all these different elements to consider in terms of really making the survey inclusive, and I hate to even say not triggering, right? Having it be like, exhale, like, wow, somebody's seeing me, I feel seen, as opposed to like an inhale of like, oh my gosh, am I oversharing too much? Is someone coming to me? And I think cultural competency is like tremendously important. Earlier in the framework, we talk about empowering and collaborating. And, a huge piece in that is really having, community stakeholders, having individuals that reflect the community, looking through the survey and the data collection tools and being able to say, I've sat in rooms and been like, we really don't have a word for that in Spanish. Like, it's like, there's like such a gap, and then also making sure it's level setted. I've had to have that conversation a few times with orgs I've worked with where I'm like, this is great, but I'm on the PhD level. This is something great for we need to bring this down to 8th grade, 5th grade, right? Just to follow best practices. And sometimes simple things like that is easy to kind of get lost.
Dr. Leah, sorry to interrupt you, but Sandra, I believe your microphone might be muted. And so the interpretation is not working. There we go. Okay. Is it now working?
I'm sorry, perdonen, se apagó aparentemente cuando cambié de canal, se apagó, me lo apagaron, pero no me di cuenta, sí.
I always have a hard time seeing everyone in the screens. Okay, I see it's working. Okay, great. Continue on, thank you.
Para hacer un resumen, Denise compartió los diferentes miedos, compartió sobre los miedos, sobre a veces compartir sobre el ingreso. Si digo el ingreso que tengo, voy a perder los diferentes beneficios que tengo. Y ella dice que realmente ella está de acuerdo con esos miedos de la población, de que realmente compartir información sensible como tal es difícil. La gente a veces pierde la confianza, pero a veces depende también de los líderes comunitarios en que crean confianza en la comunidad. Y si tú tienes buenos líderes que tú confías, entonces quizás puedas compartir esa información.
Our group was talking a lot about just the barriers to collection, which has already been touched on.
El grupo de ella estaba hablando sobre las diferentes barreras de recopilar data y a veces simplemente la dificultad de completar las encuestas.
Short survey is now too long and you can't get people to finish it. And
a veces realmente porque tenemos encuestas muy largas y le decimos a la gente es corto, contéstalo.
And just the burdens with all of that. So I think it's something
toda la carga, todo realmente contestar.
That everyone's just having trouble collecting the data.
Por eso es que todo el mundo ha tenido problemas de recopilar la data porque es difícil para la gente a veces de que la gente termine las encuestas. Simplemente llenar la encuesta como tal.
There's already a lot of good data collected, and to please start with the bigger stuff and then maybe ask for some help,
Y realmente porque realmente es buena data accesible y realmente pedir información como tal.
A lot of just discussion about just how to even collect the data.
Y es simplemente realmente recopilar esa data.
I love the discussion of data sets. I think all those pieces are good best practices.
Me encanta la discusión de los diferentes información sobre la data.
Like tapping into universities, community colleges, things of that nature.
Me encanta la información de trabajar con universidades.
Are always looking for internships,
diferentes,
things to, improve their skills, things of that nature. As someone that's been in research for many years.
Colegios comunitarios, lo que se llama community college, que realmente tengan diferentes pasantías para personas que puedan aprender sobre la data, para que tengan experiencia.
It could be a really great way in terms of like getting really strong either stats or qualitative
Y
research
realmente
skills.
es algo muy, muy
And then,
importante para que
at the end
realmente
of
te
the day,
fortalezcan en
like,
aprender la data, en en entender la data
leaders
como
and
tal,
genius.
trabajar
I
con
think
diferentes
data
organizaciones
transparency
para
is
poder
always something
entenderla y
that's
poder
like, this is
accesarla.
amazing, like, give me all the data. And then some people are like, this is okay, give me, I want to facilitate, I want to be in the
Porque
community. I
mucha,
wanna
mucha
talk
gente
to
dice, esto es
people,
increíble,
I
dame más
wanna,
data. Otra gente dice, pues no,
trends,
bueno,
don't really
no me
trust
des
it.
más
So I
data.
think sometimes like working smarter can help.
Y a veces dicen que trabajar de
And then I
manera
see a
inteligente
great
realmente
comment
ayuda.
in the chat from
Veo
Lauren.
un gran
Someone
común
share their best
comentario en
kept
el chat.
favorite links for data.
¿Cuáles son los diferentes, los favoritos
I think this
enlaces
is
para la
great. This
data?
can be sync, async. And Lauren, I don't know if you want to hop off to share any more context on that.
Y no sé si quieren compartir, Mona, más al respecto, información al respecto.
Just except to say that there seems to be some like generalized sources for municipal or community data.
Ella dice que tiene que haber alguna, algo general para la data de la comunidad.
Wanting more
Mhm.
options and more
Para
data.
ellos siempre quieren más información.
Awesome. I see two so far. Great dashboards. We love dashboards over here.
Dice que
Awesome.
ve dos, que ve realmente la
I'm gonna
información.
throw Nevada County, call them out on the spot, but they just did their community health
Pero
needs
el
assessment.
condado de
They did a
Nevada,
really great job of data visualization on their website, and so
ellos
if anyone
hicieron
is
un
from
gran
Nevada County,
trabajo en
you
visualizar
want to
la
drop
data
that link in the chat
en el
box.
sitio de
I think
internet
it's really good.
y lo voy a compartir en enlace
I
en
can
el,
look for Christina.
en
I
el
don't have
chat.
it on tap. Thanks.
And also, Maeve and Christina, I'm okay staying on to copy some of these. I think this is really, really great resources to.
Y ella le habla a Meya y a Cristina, que realmente pues, puede quedarse un ratito más para entender, en
Yeah, I
compartir la
encourage
información.
everyone, if you're like, don't have the chat open, to please open
Y
it.
realmente
Cross
exhorta a todo el
the links
mundo
and it will open tabs
que
instantly on
realmente
the Zoom.
ponga
But
alguna,
it'll be really great fodder,
el enlace en el chat.
possibly tomorrow, depending on what your schedule, or later on. But I think this is some really great links I'm seeing.
Pero he visto realmente grandes enlaces que están compartiendo en el chat. Y si alguien más quiere compartir, ella puede esperar que en lo que todo el mundo comparte la información.
Also, I did want to open the floor, another open-ended question. I
Voy
had
a
gotten a
hablar,
really
hacer
good
otra pregunta.
question on not having data sets to compare, and we made up a good point of discussing like
Otra información que ella quiere compartir, no tener data que realmente puedas hacer una
I ended up
comparación.
encouraging the participant to look at, maybe loneliness data and things of that
Por
nature.
ejemplo,
So I
data
did
de las
want to
personas que
open the
están,
floor
se
if
sienten
there was
solas,
anyone that also felt that way.
alguien que se sintió de esa manera.
Maybe you're in substance misuse, and you're like, hey, I don't even know where to start. What are some
O sea, realmente quizá
helpful
puedas decir, pues soy una persona que
pieces? I don't know if
tengo un
that's
problema con el uso de sustancias
similar questions.
y no sé realmente por dónde empezar.
Yeah, I think I definitely have to collect some data for grants from youth, and they
Realmente, en
some
el
of the
caso de la
data
persona que
it
está
is a
hablando, ella tiene que
hard like question to
recopilar
lump
data
in
de las
with like
personas
how do
jóvenes.
you identify? It's also like have you ever
Y
been
una de las
in
preguntas
the
es, ¿cómo
juvenile
te
justice
identificas?
system or have had substance abuse
¿Has tenido problemas
history
con el uso de
in the past,
sustancias
like that kind of thing? And so
adictivas?
I put a lot of thought around how I word questions. I also
Y yo
like
realmente pues,
make sure
le
all the
pongo mucho
options
pensamiento en
are
cómo
there
realmente
for
voy a
people
hacer
so
la
that they don't
pregunta
get
para
put
que la
into
juventud me pueda
or
contestar.
get forced into a certain box that doesn't make sense for them. And so I think my bigger question
Hago de
is
alguna
just
manera
around
para que haga
like
sentido para los jóvenes.
I while these links were coming in, I was like, does anybody also have like their favorite demographic form? That kind of like
Hago
works
algunas
for
preguntas si
USD,
realmente alguien tiene
but
alguna forma
also
favorita de
give us
hacer
the
esto,
data they need. Like
cómo hacer
our
este
board has
tipo de
also had to
preguntas
use
demográficas, que a veces es
the
difícil
county
preguntar, y
one,
especialmente para las
which
personas
is
jóvenes.
okay. It's not my favorite, but that is like a requirement for one of our departments. But I would love to like curate it to make it the way that I
Por
want,
ejemplo,
so
la
that
data del
it
condado no es mi
is more like
favorita y
a
me gustaría
welcoming
mejorarla como tal.
experience and feeling like people can be honest. But I guess there's that barrier of like how to ask those difficult questions and make it
Y una de
feel
las
like,
cosas es cómo
okay,
realmente pues,
as well
hacer preguntas
as,
difíciles.
I work with kids, so there's the barrier of parents actually filling out the form for them because I'm gearing towards like putting it along with our waivers and everything else that they need to
O sea,
fill
porque
out
realmente a
just so
veces
that it
también
doesn't
pues,
feel like
trabajo con
seamless.
jóvenes en que realmente los padres son los que tienen que llenar la encuesta.
So I
Y
just
son
kind of
preguntas
am always
difíciles que se
curious
hacen.
about the best. What is the most ideal form and how is it worded
Y
and
siempre
what
me
is
pregunto cuál es la
what
mejor
does it
manera
look
que
like
pueda ser yo
for
de
somebody
preguntarle a los
to experience
jóvenes
that
información sensitiva.
filling it out and then also wording those like harder questions that they might be like, why are you asking me this? But it's
Y
like
realmente pues a
we
veces
report to a
le hago
grant,
preguntas y no quiero,
but,
y yo sé que los jóvenes dicen, ¿por qué
and not
realmente me están
making it feel
preguntando
like
esto?
we're gonna judge you off of this or
Y
like
lo que
making sure
realmente,
that
lo
you
que
feel
ella no quiere es
informed
que los
or
jóvenes se sientan
I don't know.
juzgados por las
It's
preguntas que hacen. Entonces ella
without
siempre
like
está
having
tratando
a
de ver
legal question
maneras
where they
o
have to fill
preguntándoles a
things out.
ustedes
So
la
I think
mejor manera de hacer estas preguntas para ella
I'm
poder
hearing kind
hacer
of
una
having
encuesta
it
más efectiva.
centralized, asking, sensitive questions.
Yo sé, ella que es
And
difícil
also
preguntar,
response,
preguntas
right?
sensitivas.
So I think for that, I think some helpful things to
Una de las
further
cosas que ella
consider is
recomienda
maybe
para
looking at
considerar
past surveys as well, seeing like response
también
rates.
es
Like sometimes
simplemente
we're
mirar
pretty good at
a
the survey, but
los
students are doing it, right? So
preguntas
yeah, there's
anteriores,
some
a las
kinks, but
encuestas
students are
anteriores.
generally filling it out. So I think that could be helpful to do.
¿Cuáles son
Another
esas
thing that we
encuestas que los
sometimes do in
estudiantes
our
están
role in
llenando
like
y
research and
y cómo ellos
evaluation
hacen esas
is
preguntas?
kind of pull skeleton surveys. And that's kind of surveys related to your topic area of interest.
Hay una
So
cosa
I
que
had
dice
did one for
el survey de
SAMHSA a few years
Skeleton y dice que
ago,
siempre que
and
ellos
sometimes
hacen
pull
las
skeleton
encuestas
surveys
de
when we're working
acuerdo
with young
al,
adults and HIV and drug use. And
por
we have
ejemplo, a
type
los
in
jóvenes
young
adultos, a
adult
las personas que
HIV
tienen
survey.
SIDA.
.org.edu. Usually you'll get university or orgs, and that's a helpful way to kind of see like, oh, like I like the way they asked that, or
Y
this is a
realmente, pues,
helpful
si tú ves
piece. So it kind of
cuando
was
los enlaces
called
terminan en
skeleton because
org,
it
a
gives you
veces
like
son
an
en diferentes
idea. You could
organizaciones,
obviously shape it to
universidades,
conform,
y
but
entender
that
realmente
I
cómo
sometimes
ellos
look at
hacen
and I'm
ese
like,
tipo de preguntas, cómo ellos hacen las preguntas a los jóvenes.
I wonder what this looks like, kind of per
Y
se.
por
And then
ejemplo,
I'm
y
a
tú
really big
averiguar
fan of whether they're doing the
cómo
survey
es
or
que ellos
IDing it
realmente
or
ellos
the
redactan
questions
ese
piece,
tipo de
really
preguntas
stressing
para los jóvenes.
not the confidentiality element. The
Y
program we're
también
working
está el
with is
elemento de
federal
la
and grant-based, so
confidencialidad
we're asking really hard questions,
y cómo
sexual
realmente hacemos las
activity,
preguntas difíciles, actividad sexual,
vulnerable kids
el
in
uso
there.
de
So
drogas.
we're really stressing in that like directions portion. This
Y
is
también
completely
ahí nos pueden
confidential.
ayudar
This will not be,
y cómo
shared
realmente
X,
ellos
Y, and
pueden,
Z.
los jóvenes
That
pueden
data is not on our
contestar
website
este tipo de
floating around.
preguntas.
Open data is not there because it's very private. So I think things like that can help.
Esas cosas sí
But I
pueden
hope that
ayudar.
was helpful. We do have to hop to the next slide for now.
Vamos
But I do think some of the questions and some of the notes that I have will get answered as we continue on.
Y yo pienso que muchas de las preguntas que ustedes tienen se van a contestar en las próximas diapositivas.
And please check the chat. As I was talking, there's more
Por favor,
resources.
revise su chat porque hay más recursos en el chat.
Good, collective problem solving.
Porque realmente vamos a recopilar cómo resolver diferentes
We
problemas.
talked about a lot of different things in terms
Hablamos
of
de diferentes cosas,
technology access, limited sample
acceso al
size, things of
conocimiento.
that nature, and some helpful workarounds that we talked about last time, and some things that I just want to reiterate as well again, is the importance of, partnering with trusted community members.
Una de las cosas es pues,
in
realmente
terms of data collection initiatives,
cómo
and
realmente
building trust.
asociarse con los diferentes miembros de la comunidad para compartir la data,
I'm
obtener esa información. Y la semana que viene va a haber una conferencia.
Social scientists collect a lot of data that time. There's a lot
Muchas
of
de las
young
personas
people.
que están
I can imagine who want
científicas
data on
recopilan
substance
mucha
misuse or some other
data.
things, so that'd be a really good time to collect that data. I was
Es el
interested and
momento para
curious, and I was
compartir.
looking up all the events happening at the conference, and I noticed
Y
that
realmente
all
estaba
these
viendo los diferentes eventos que
restaurants and
están pasando a través de en la
community
conferencia.
center pickleball is really popular with the millennials.
Por ejemplo,
Right?
el centro
All of
comunitario,
them
el
are having a
pickleball,
station with
es algo muy
state
interesante.
organizations that are like, hey, you could take this survey. Hey, you take the survey, we'll get your ticket, so you don't have to pay for your ticket. So things like
Por
that.
ejemplo, cosas así,
Can be really
toma la encuesta,
helpful,
si no tienes que
build
pagar
trust
por
that
ir al
community
evento.
members
Esas son
already
cosas que
built
realmente
in,
les
and
anima
then
a las
if you guys
personas a
feel
tomar la
there,
encuesta.
maybe you're with a community partner and gaining more data. Another ideas like, you know, aspects like this in terms of getting staff comfortable with data and
Y
talking about
realmente que las
it.
personas se sienten cómodas con la, la data y también dejarles saber al personal.
Loaner computer devices. Local libraries are good for this. Grants are
Entonces,
great
por
for this.
ejemplo,
I recently worked with a nonprofit where we were able to get a grant
para
for loaner
conseguir diferentes
computers.
data, puedes ir a la
Putting the
biblioteca,
computers near the
usar la
lobby,
computadora,
for
ahí tienen
youth and
información, tienen
participants to
diferentes bases de
use, and
datos que
that
puedes
helped their
accesar.
data collection by a lot. You know, nothing's wrong with phones was another thing when like, oh, the survey's already up and in 5 minutes you could just knock it out right here on the loaner. So things like that can be a very interesting thing to consider as
Son
well.
cosas muy, cosas así, pero son
And,
cosas que pueden considerar.
We'll continue on. I have some of the pain points that I heard. So as I'm going on, I'll be naming some of those pain points.
Vamos a
and
continuar
getting
escuchando
into
las diferentes opiniones de cada uno de ustedes.
Awesome. So now we will hop to a really fun interactive segment of the presentation.
Ahora vamos a estar en una parte muy interactiva y
I ended up
divertida de la
finding this
presentación.
really great resource and real life case study example of
Yo realmente pues
data
pude
chats
conseguir esta
and this
información
initiative called Data You Can Use that was used in rural Armani,
y esto se
Milwaukee.
llama
And
Data
this is a really
that you can
interesting
use, que en español
real
se
world
dice datos que
example.
puedes usar.
And
Es
this
bastante
initiative
simple.
really focuses on making data approachable,
Y esto realmente es
meaningful
cómo
for
hacer que la
community
data sea
members and especially
accesible,
those in hard to reach underserved areas. Before we
especialmente
go
para
into it,
aquellas
and I'm gonna share my
personas que
screen
tienen que
and
estar trabajando
kind
con
of walk through this
comunidades
really great
que no
case
son
study
fáciles de
together.
accesar.
Some things I wanted to name is the idea behind data chats is to really empower community members by demystifying data and showing them how it could serve them, right? So I got a few comments
Y
today
una de
with
las cosas que
trust,
quiero enfatizar es que realmente cómo empoderar a la comunidad para que puedan utilizar la data de forma divertida y cómo empoderarlos para utilizarlo mejor.
Have them
Y
come together, discuss what the data says about their neighborhoods, also share their concerns, and also explore how data insights can guide improvements.
Por ejemplo, hice un experimento con un vecindario, con un grupo de personas de la comunidad, en cómo realmente pueden interpretar la data y lo que significa para ellos. Cómo realmente podemos identificar prioridades, cosas que se pueden hacer mejor en el futuro. Aquí tenemos algunos pantallazos y vamos a realmente a hablar sobre cada uno de ellos.
Can everyone see my screen?
Todo el mundo puede ver mi
Okay, awesome. So this is, like I mentioned, a really great
presentación.
initiative, data chat that was used in Armani, Milwaukee, to help with
Esta presentación de Data Chat fue utilizado en Amani, Milwaukee,
data capture.
y también
Can I
cómo se
ask a really
capturó
quick
las
question?
diferentes.
Where is that, Armani, Milwaukee?
Ella quiere saber qué significa Amani, Milwaukee.
No,
Okay, that's okay.
I don't know the exact area.
Ella no sabe exactamente dónde queda Amani, Milwaukee. Y también ella dice que es muy mala en geografía.
Is it Milwaukee, the city, or is it a rural area somewhere in the country?
Hoy no sabe si es Milwaukee la ciudad o es una zona rural.
Okay, got it.
Creo que es un condado. Ella dice que cree que es un condado cerca de Milwaukee.
So these data chats were used by a local nonprofit.
Esta data como tal se utilizaron en una organización sin fines de lucro para conectar a las personas para que entiendan la necesidad de la data y cómo la data puede contar la historia de la persona. Se entiende que no hay historia sin data y no hay data sin historia. Pero antes de que empezamos la interacción, vamos a tener algunas cosas sobre romper el hielo. Vamos a hablar sobre la salud de la data. Vamos a hablar sobre los diferentes vecindarios.
And how often are maybe some of our data sharing or some of our even, local organization data talks a bit more the inverse,
Vamos a hablar
right?
sobre cómo las diferentes organizaciones comparten la data.
members, right? Does this data seem right? Based on what we learned today, what could be done in the short term, what could be done in the long term.
Por ejemplo, de acuerdo
I
a la
really
data
like this.
que
This is
están
something
aceptando la
that
comunidad, de acuerdo a la data que vemos que podemos hacer en el futuro, si la data está correcta, que hemos aprendido el día de hoy, que se puede hacer a corto plazo, que se puede hacer a largo plazo. Y realmente nos hemos reunido con nuestro diferente personal para realmente ver qué se puede hacer con esta información. Y ellos lo que hicieron fue compartieron data local y los diferentes 4 centros que se ven aquí.
And they go into kind of share an overview of data related to
Y aquí
people,
tienen una data en
housing
general
unit,
sobre
older housing stock,
la cantidad de
industry service
personas, la
workers
unidad,
that are in
las
the area,
las
and
personas
then
que viven
households with no vehicles.
por hogar,
And this was
cuántas
important
personas
to
mayores
consider,
viven
being that
en ese hogar,
area of the
si eran personas
nonprofit,
que trabajan en la industria de servicios,
transportation and housing were really big
y si estas
concerns.
personas que viven en el hogar no tienen algún método de transportación.
Additionally, they did a really great age breakdown of
También
populations,
dividieron
older
esta
than
data
55, 25 to 50,
por edad,
and those that were
mayores de
underrepresented.
55
I really
años,
like this. We see here
personas de
great data
25 años a
visualization, right?
54
Our
años,
really big numbers
y
as someone that works in user experience.
niños
We're always
o
talking about,
jóvenes
like, what's
adultos de
user
0
friendly, like what's
a
attractive
24
from a
años.
data visualization standpoint. Great pictures, large numbers, medium subtext. It's always pretty
También
valuable.
tenemos grandes,
So next they go in with the community members and
y,
they
ahora-
tell
y
them,
luego
they give
fueron
them these
sobre los
worksheets,
diferentes miembros de
and
la
they kind of
comunidad,
walk them through this interactive
y ellos
exercise
realmente
where
pues
they have
hablaron
them list
sobre
the
este
names of 10
ejercicio
people they know
interactivo.
that live in the neighborhood. And in the activity that you'll see, they'll circle
Ellos
an
sabían que estas
icon
personas
for each
viven
person that you know
en
has
el
the same
vecindario, en la
health condition.
comunidad.
And they'll also put a question mark if they're like unsure or they don't know, right? And this is really important. We
Lo que hicieron
haven't
fue,
gone
por
too much
ejemplo,
into it.
nombraron 10 personas
Dr.
que
Wright,
viven en
feel
la
free to hop
comunidad que
off
ellos conocen,
mic
que le dijeron
for this because we have
quiénes
a
son 10
long
personas que
list
viven en la
listed in this
comunidad. Muchas
area,
veces personas
but
no lo
something we talk
conocían,
about a lot in
y que
community
escribieran
health is
algo si algunas de estas personas tenían alguna condición de salud. Y cualquier pregunta que tuvieran que ellos no sabían. Pusieran un signo de interrogación si no sabían la respuesta. Hablaron sobre culturas.
Community that they're reaching out to, they were highly collectivist, highly family oriented,
Por ejemplo, si esta comunidad realmente
so kind of having
dedicada a la comunidad multigeneracional, ellos realmente pueden mencionar 10 personas que viven en la comunidad, pueden contar historias, contestar preguntas.
But Dr. Wright, I did want to, like, if you want to share anything else about like that.
Dr. Wright, no sé si quieres
collectivist
compartir algo
culture
más
and
sobre
individualistic.
cómo recopilar data en este tipo de comunidad.
We'll keep going. She comes back, she'll share.
Entonces voy a
So
continuar.
moving down, we see
Vamos
here
a
that this is the
continuar.
worksheet. So we have here high blood pressure, diabetes,
Y
and
aquí
chronic
tenemos la
asthma.
información, por
So
ejemplo,
I
la
have a
primera
question here.
parte es
Dr.
alta
Herbert, how can
presión.
we tie data to outcomes? This is
Y la
it,
primera
right?
pregunta
So for
es,
this,
¿cómo
I'm
Dr.
gonna hit some of the
Herbert,
core
cómo
areas
realmente
that they're really
podemos
focusing on is high
enlazar
blood
la data
pressure, chronic
a los
asthma.
resultados?
So by inputting it in here in this worksheet and in this data share, they're able to also kind of use this data to
Cuando
further
realmente implementamos
give
o
more information
la
related
data en
to
esta
the intervention
información,
of the data chat, but
y
also
así
have data
realmente
that
podemos
informs
hacer
their outcomes
intervención de
like
la
high
data
blood
como
pressure
tal.
reduction or chronic asthma reduction.
Y así podemos saber, por ejemplo, tengo alta
That's
presión,
something
tengo
I've also
asma
noted too,
crónica,
in terms
tengo
of
diabetes.
looking at some of your core impact areas and
Y también
seeing
podemos
ways
ver
not
cuáles
only
son
a
las áreas
survey, not only a focus group,
más
but if you're doing
importantes.
this data chat per se, what might it look like in terms of putting it in here? I know I talked
Por
with
ejemplo,
someone
esto se
today
llama, lo que le llaman data
they
chat.
do kind of creative classes in the community.
Y, por
and a lot of
ejemplo, ¿cuáles
art-based
son,
work,
cuáles son las
and rather
necesidades
than
que
high blood
pueden, o
pressure,
cosas que
diabetes,
pueden
and
hacer,
chronic
crear clases en la
asthma,
comunidad?
I might
Si
put
tengo,
something of, attending a local art class
por
or
ejemplo, si tengo asma,
having
o por
access
ejemplo,
to,
cómo asistir a
local
una clase de arte en la
exercise, or even
comunidad.
having a basketball or tennis court or something like that
O, por ejemplo,
nearby.
tener
And
canchas
all
de
those little
baloncesto o de
pieces
tenis
will be helpful
disponibles.
to inform future data.
Y eso realmente ayuda realmente a
So then
informar.
here, they're filling this out, they're talking.
Y ellos realmente están llenando esta
Staff is
información.
walking around, all the facilitators.
Y
And
el,
here we have
el
the
personal está hablando con todo en la
So
comunidad.
how common are these conditions locally?
Y les
Here
pregunta
they show that,
qué en común, qué tan
of
común
people
son
in our
estas condiciones de
community have,
salud
high blood pressure.
en
They
la
even showed
comunidad de Amani.
20% of people in our community have diabetes.
Por ejemplo, el 22% de la comunidad tiene diabetes, el 15% tiene asma crónica, el 50% tiene alta presión.
I think later on they go into, boom, this is great. So they go into it, they compare it to the local city nearby.
Y también esta información, una vez que los tienen, la ponen en la data, la comparan con la población más cerca, que en este caso es la ciudad de Milwaukee.
22% for our neighborhood, but then only 12% for the, other
Por
neighborhood
ejemplo,
nearby.
en la comunidad de Milwaukee, en la ciudad de Milwaukee, solamente el 12% tiene diabetes, pero en la ciudad de Amman el 22% tiene diabetes. Y así son los diferentes resultados de este tipo de data chat que estas personas le preguntaron a la comunidad.
I know someone mentioned comparison data, like, oh, Dr. Herbert, it's hard to find that comparison data.
Muchas veces alguien mencionó, por ejemplo, cómo podemos comparar la data. O solamente a veces la vemos solamente para California, la vemos para ciertas áreas.
And then this is another element, mental health, right?
Y otro elemento, por ejemplo, la salud mental. Las personas están enfrentando más ansiedad y depresión desde que la pandemia comenzó.
And they pulled this data from the US Census Household Pulse
Y esta
Survey.
data vino del censo de Estados Unidos. Y finalmente, esto es algo muy corto, no es una presentación muy larga. Y ellos dijeron, si tú puedes hacer una recomendación a tus vecinos, en lo que se puede hacer en los próximos 6 meses, ¿qué tú piensas? ¿Qué podría ser esta recomendación? Por ejemplo, ¿cómo se ve ese programa comunitario? ¿Cómo podemos hacerlo mejor?
But for some people, like, that's a really good idea. Would you be interested in like sharing that with our staff? Or could we,
Por ejemplo,
further
si
develop that?
una vez que
Things of that
compartan estas
nature, I'm
soluciones
sure
con
it's
la
not only,
comunidad o con los líderes de la comunidad, pues
taking
le
to
pueden
say,
decir, bueno,
but it's
realmente es
taking
una buena
time.
oportunidad,
So
una
it's a
gran
really
oportunidad, una
helpful
gran idea, quizás lo
study.
podemos
And I think,
implementar.
some of the pain points I wrote down was engagement, more data, getting more people involved. A great thing they
Una
did
de las
with these
cosas que
data
yo he
tracks is
mencionado
stay
es realmente
consistent.
cómo involucrar
So
más a las
imagine this
personas en
getting
la
done every 2
participación
months.
de
So it's
data.
very
Y esto
consistent.
se hace cada 2
People in the
meses.
neighborhood started getting used to it.
Y las
Two,
personas en la vecindad o en esta área ya sea que se acostumbraron a que estaban hace tiempo a este tipo de encuestas. Por ejemplo, cuando proveemos comida, cuando proveemos cuidado de niños, hacen una diferencia para que las personas puedan llenar esta información. Yo sé que realmente a veces pues, el personal tiene que trabajar hasta tarde, sí lo entiendo, pero que realmente el resultado es productivo. También hablamos sobre la data del tiempo, hablamos de la competencia cultural, español, inglés. También tenían otro idioma. Eso está muy bueno.
A person, one of their community partners, that was really closely tied to the community, look over.
También tenemos una persona de la comunidad que era muy cerca de la comunidad que estaba dando sugerencias. Y todo esto ayuda de una gran manera. Y esto realmente ayuda a las personas a que realmente puedan llenar las encuestas. Estas son ideas que les quiero compartir. También tengo algunas preguntas en el chat. Y ella dice que no tiene preguntas, así que va a pausar para algunas preguntas.
Check the chat really quickly.
Voy a checar, ella va a revisar el chat. Gracias, Pam.
Okay, awesome. So we'll continue on. And
Vamos a continuar.
Yeah, we'll continue on. Let me stop sharing. Sorry. And Maeve will end up hopping to the we'll end up keep going because I want to make a little time for the activity.
Y voy a continuar porque quiero que realmente nos alcance el tiempo.
Okay. So I wanted to pause here.
Voy a
I
pausar
know
aquí.
that we ended up skipping a few slides, but
Yo sé que
we
realmente
will be able
saltamos
to
algunas de las
share it to you
diapositivas.
guys. I just wanted to focus in on here a little bit. This is another kind of interactive activity. I know we just went
Quiero
through
enfocarme en esta
a case
actividad
study
interactiva.
and things of that nature. But
Por
this
eso
is
que
another
quise
case study
compartir
that to me does a really good example of using their data to outcomes to inform their diversity action planning.
y esto es algo
And
realmente
they do it so much so that they
interesante esta
realize,
actividad.
hey, we're not disaggregating data. We really want this to be a core goal for ours. Some of
Realmente
the
no es
breakout rooms
que
I was
realmente
in,
queramos
there was a
desagregar
few
la
people
data.
that mentioned we disaggregate, but we don't tie to outcomes.
Y realmente muchas personas
We
dicen, nosotros
disaggregate, but
desagregamos la
we still
data,
want to
pero
work on
realmente
improving our
no
sample
la
size.
conectamos
So
con
that's
los
things that we
resultados.
can consider for, future equity action planning and goals of the sorts.
Y esto realmente
And can be really
lo podemos
helpful
considerar en
in
un
terms
futuro
of
para la acción de la
informing
diversidad,
our
y
future
equidad
work.
e inclusión.
As mentioned before, sometimes we're so in the theory of the what, but
Porque
the
realmente
how
a veces
piece
estamos
gets
muchas veces en la teoría
gets
de
lost.
lo
So
que
I
es.
did want to take a little bit of time, but we could stay
Voy a
on this
tomar un poquito
slide.
de tiempo.
But I did want to take a little bit of time to walk us through this action plan and
Voy
walk
a
us
hablar
through
sobre este
like
plan de
their
acción
strategy 6
y las
of
estrategias.
disaggregated data and think through, is this something of interest in terms of looking at it?
Y si es
What we
algo
will
que
be
les
looking at to
interesa
name is
en
Oregon's
cuanto
Department of Early Learning and Care. And this is, as I mentioned, a really good example of naming disaggregated data as a goal to inform equity-focused initiatives.
Y esto es importante porque realmente en esta data desagregada podemos hablar sobre diversidad, equidad y justicia.
Equity charter, and there are some of their local goals as well.
Y podemos
And
hablar
one thing
sobre
I wanted to highlight is their kind of commitment to not only disaggregated data at the community level, disaggregated data at the internal level. So you'll
Yo creo que
see
quiero
here
añadir
in the
no
table
solamente
type,
la
they
data
talk about
desagregada a la
disaggregated data
parte
of
de comunidad, sino a
board member. Considering some things related to language, considering some things
también
related to
podemos
location.
considerar
So that
otro
they're
tipo de
better
data en
able
cuanto
to
al
tailor the
idioma.
services
No
and
solamente en
policies
cuanto a
more
los
effective.
miembros de la comunidad, sino
And
a los
more
centros
importantly,
específicos.
meeting the needs of their
Y realmente
local
conocer las
communities in some of the
necesidades
rural
de la
areas
comunidad.
that they haven't been able to get as much and impact as much. So as
Especialmente en
I
aquellas áreas
share
en
my
que no han
screen and
podido
review
tener
and I
mucho
kind of walk
impacto.
through this action plan, and we're going to
Y
focus
quiero
in on
realmente hablar sobre
strategy
este plan de
6. I
acción.
want you to do an inwards reflection.
Y quiero
What
que
element
realmente
of this Oregon
reflexiones como
early
tal.
learning action plan, could be adapted to fit the goals of your organizations,
Y realmente
what
estos planes,
actions
¿qué
in this
acciones y
disaggregated
cuáles son las
action
acciones del
might
plan
you want
que
to,
podrían adaptarse al
add
objetivo
to
de tu
your future
organización? ¿Qué acciones te
organizations
gustaría agregar al plan de
equity
acción
plan?
de diversidad,
And,
equidad
thinking through
e
how some of this
inclusión
can be
de tu
really helpful
organización?
for
¿Cómo
some of
podría
your
influenciar la
teams that work
recopilación
with
de
you?
datos más detallada en
And
las
then take
decisiones
some time
futuras
to
de
breakout
tu
rooms for a
organización?
little bit and really just thinking about, how can we use this to inform our equity
¿Cómo
plan?
podemos usar
Are
esta
there
data
any
para informar
actions or goals in this section that we might want to peer into?
a nuestros
And things of that
miembros
nature.
de la
And I
comunidad
have the
cuáles son las
questions
cosas que se
broken
pueden
up
poner
with
en acción?
program leads, and I also have questions relevant for board. So we might have a separate
También hay
room for
preguntas para
board members, and
los
we'll
miembros de
have
la Junta.
Dr. Wright will be hopping back and forth in
Lo que
that
vamos a hacer en las salas de
as
trabajo,
well.
revisar,
I'll be sharing my
esto es
screen,
lo que
and
queremos
we'll
al plan de
do a
acción. ¿Qué
deep dive
acciones te
together.
gustaría agregar al plan de acción de diversidad, equidad e inclusión? ¿Cómo podría influenciar la recuperación de datos más detallada en las decisiones futuras de tu organización?
So this
Y la
is the
Junta, ¿cómo
action
podría tu
plan.
Junta
It
usar
is
mejor los datos
fairly long,
desagregados para informar las
but
decisiones
some good
estratégicas?
best practices
¿Cómo
that I
podemos
do include
asegurar que el
here.
uso de datos
Obviously, they have
desagregados se
table of
convierta en una
contents.
práctica
They
sostenible
have their letter from their executive
y
director.
continua de tu
They have
organización?
the summary of their services, their mission and values, their equity statement. We started off this with the TCF equity statement, which is really great. And then they
Por
also
ejemplo,
have their
en
roadmap to
en este
equity
caso,
plan.
pues
So we'll
tenemos
talk about that a little bit more in this session. But today we'll be
sobre la
focusing
misión,
on
la
around page 11
declaración
with like
de
leveraging
equidad,
disaggregated data for change.
y tenemos
But
las
just
diferentes
showing you
estrategias
that,
utilizando la
there
data
are
desagregada.
from broad to specific.
Y realmente lo que tenemos la carta del
So,
director, la misión y cómo podemos ir desde lo más amplio hasta lo más
I
específico
first
como
want to
tal.
just name this page, the road path to implementation. So I know a lot of us are
Quiero
hungry. We wanna
compartirles
start
cuál es
now. We wanna change
el
now.
mapa para la
You know, as
implementación.
I mentioned before, change takes time, trust takes time, you
Yo sé,
know.
como dije
So they really
anteriormente, el
ended up
cambio
building
toma
out their
tiempo, la
goals,
confianza toma
and then their
tiempo,
action plan objectives, and then their 90
los diferentes
strategies that will
objetivos
help
del
them reach
plan de
their
diversidad,
objectives.
equidad e
So as we
inclusión.
go through this, really think about not only, hey, we want to improve
Mientras realmente
disaggregated data,
repasamos
but what
esto,
objective might this tie to?
no solamente podemos decir cómo podemos repasar
Your
esto,
org
sino
might have its
qué
own objectives,
objetivos,
its own goals,
qué
but just some
planes de
interesting things to
acción
consider.
tenemos,
Especially when you
podemos
think about
hacer.
like organizing efforts to build capacity,
Por
or
ejemplo,
expansion of social equity. So things of that nature.
inspirar a la
But it's all
expansión de la
connected,
equidad
and I just
social en
wanted
nuestra
to name
organización,
this
organizar
because of
esfuerzos
efforts
y
before.
construcción,
A lot of us are
construir
doing
diferentes
planning, a lot of
talleres
us are kind of in that
de
end of stage goals. So
capacitación,
just things
cómo
to consider.
conectar, cómo ser más cohesivo,
So
cómo
let's
tener
hop to
un impacto mayor.
6. Okay. So I'll just give a brief highlight. Strategy 6, leveraging disaggregated data as a lever for change.
Vamos a hacer
They
la
mentioned
parte
that the
6,
org
cómo
will build a culture of
la data
curiosity.
desagregada
We talked about
puede
that in the
ser
beginning,
realmente
leveraging
un motor de
qualitative and
cambio.
quantitative data to drive questions and mitigate data limitations. This
Ella dice
includes
que
integrating
esto
data
construye
into
una cultura y
ongoing
una práctica
practices, right?
de
Monitoring progress,
liberar
informing decisions,
la data cualitativa y
and conveying
cuantitativa para
analytics
poder
like
realmente
storytelling. They mentioned that this will be
implementar
informed by Oregon's data
preguntas y
strategy
mitigar la
and
limitación de
Northwestern's
datos.
data
Esto incluye
strategy,
integrar la
and
data
making
en las
community
prácticas de
driven
diversidad,
decisions
equidad,
visible and
y
promoting
iluminar
community
y iluminar y
self-determination.
monitorear
And
el
this is really exciting
progreso
when we
para
think
hacer
about
para tomar decisiones
infographics, right?
informadas
And we think
y
about murals, and we think about just creative ways to tell the
realmente
story. And some of their actions that
tener
we have here
algo
is, conducting an inventory of data necessary to be
factible sobre el
divested,
progreso,
collecting and
contar la
analyzing,
historia y las
reporting
analíticas.
granular data with respect to privacy and self-determination.
Una
So
de las
earlier we
acciones
had
que
a
podemos
question,
hacer es
hey,
construir
Dr. Herbert, this sounds great, but what about,
accesar un
sensitive
inventario
topics
sobre
or
cuál es la data
things that we have
necesaria
to
para
have
cada
extra care
programa o cada
around?
oficina,
We are going to have
recopilar la data, analizarla y reportarla de forma granular con respecto a la privacidad
privacy piece is really important.
y la determinación, en este
Collecting
caso fueron las
baseline
personas
data
de Oregón.
analysis to understand like what is our current rate look like. And then lastly, use administrative data to prepare
Y
annual
también
reports
utilizar data
that transparently
administrativa,
show how funds are spent and
cómo
timed.
realmente se utiliza esta data
And I
como
think
tal.
this is big because even if you're at the question of like, hey, we're not connecting data to outcomes as good as we should, that can be one of the actions in your action
Una de las
plan.
cosas que podemos hacer si
So
realmente
action plans
estamos
give you grace
recopilando la
because
data y
you
no
have
la
time to
estamos,
say,
no la
hey,
estamos
we're not doing
conectando
this
con los
now, but we
resultados,
can definitely do it pretty soon. So what I
realmente
want us
es
to
algo que
do is
realmente
to
se puede
go into
hacer.
breakout rooms.
Ahora vamos a
We'll
hacer,
probably go
vamos,
into breakout rooms for now for like 12 minutes, and then we'll
vamos a
hop
ir a
back to
diferentes
center
grupos
and
por
just
12
share some
minutos.
ideas and,
Solamente
kind of
compartan
some
algunas
ideas up in
ideas.
terms of really thinking about how we can use disaggregated data in terms
¿Cómo
of
podemos
our
utilizar
action
data
plans
desagregada?
and
Lo que
future goals.
significa es data desglosada en diferentes porciones para realmente crear impacto en nuestra
And
organización.
myself and Dr. Wright and facilitators will be hopping from room
Y,
to room.
ella y Dr. Wright y los facilitadores van a
So,
entrar en
Dr. Herbert,
diferentes.
before I open the rooms, I just want to make sure that I'm clear. So what we'll be doing in our small groups is just
Antes de
talking
que-
about how we would
Antes de que eran los
use
diferentes grupos,
disaggregated data to
ella quiere aclarar cuál es la
to
pregunta que vamos a
influence
hacer.
isn't the
¿Cómo
right word, but to
utilizar la data
have us running
desagregada?
DEI action plans. That's what we're
Yeah,
talking about.
if
Okay.
you open the
Utilizarlo
slide
en
too, it
un
has
plan de
questions on there.
diversidad,
I can copy
equidad
them and
e
put them in the
inclusión.
slide if that's in the chat if that's helpful as well. But if you share the slide, I have questions for like program leads. I have questions for board members. So if board members want to go in a
Si tú
separate
compartes la presentación, tengo preguntas para la junta y
I
también
can
tengo
keep us in the
preguntas
same
para-
rooms, but I think
Okay.
it would be helpful to copy the questions in. So
Okay,
Oh, there we go. Thanks.
Okay.
Alguien
Thank
está
you,
copiando las
moderator, that.
preguntas en el chat.
Oh, thanks, Maeve. I could just do yes. Okay, great. So we are going to talk about, and you said 12 minutes, and I know I just used 2 minutes. So we have about 10 minutes in our small group. Is that right? Okay. Does
Tenemos
anybody have any
prácticamente
other
como
questions before
10
we jump into
minutos
the breakout?
en
Okay. All right,
en
I'm
los
going to open
pequeños
the
grupos.
rooms.
Voy a copiar las preguntas en español
Andrea,
en
if
el
you were
chat.
with Andrea before, I have moved you to Denise's room because Andrea had to leave early today. So
Si
Sandra,
estabas con Andrea, te voy a mudar al grupo de Denise porque Andrea se tuvo que ir temprano hoy.
Okay, I'm gonna open, oh, thanks, Maeve. Okay.
Awesome, awesome. It is amazing to have everyone back. I really enjoyed my group. We were like talking to the last minute. So, we know we had some
Estábamos,
really helpful insights and then things to share. I do want
estuvimos
to name,
hablando con mi grupo y entiendo que hubo momentos muy increíbles que podemos compartir.
But yeah, I would love to sit and first, before we even reflect, can I have one or two debrief, you know? How was
¿Alguien
this
puede,
activity
quiere
for you from a
compartir
temperature check point of view? You know, was it, you know, interesting? Was it challenging?
qué
Did it
realmente
make
pueden
you
compartir? ¿Fue
consider
interesante?
things
¿Fue
the next day?
retante?
Just from a
Quiero ver
debrief
cuál fue la
during the
temperatura,
activity.
como ella lo dice
Any
así,
thoughts? And
de
it
la
could be
conversación
positive
que
or
tuvimos en los
negative. It could
pequeños
just be like,
grupos.
I didn't even know where to start. You know, it took me some while to get my footing. That's a great answer as well.
Me gustaría compartir, escuchar de algunos de ustedes lo que compartieron en los grupos, sus reflexiones.
I mean, I'll share that it's lovely connecting with folks. I am
Cuanto que realmente fue muy, muy
recently moved
bueno
back to the area,
conectarme
and
con las
it's nice
diferentes
that this kind of
personas.
work is happening in my hometown.
Yeah.
Y eso realmente está pasando en mi
Ray.
profesional.
I think that's a really good element. And, you know, I mean, we talk about community, but it could be so good, you know, seeing familiar faces and, you know, delving into
Realmente
new
hablamos de la
areas.
comunidad, pero realmente es bueno cuando compartimos con miembros de la comunidad que conocemos.
Get started. So I think the next piece I wanted to go into as well is our group did a really good job into looking
La
at the
próxima
action plan, right? Thinking
es que
we
quiero
first
hablar de
asked
los
ourselves,
diferentes
if disaggregated data,
próximos
if we
pasos
had
de
a magic
acción.
wand and we could do our
Que
fancy,
tenemos la varita
action
mágica como
plan,
tal.
would we put
¿Cuáles son los?
disaggregated data as one of our key strategy goals?
Porque
And
realmente
everyone
una
said
de las
yes.
metas de los
So,
datos
you know, I
agregados,
wanted to open the floor
esa es
for
una de
that.
las estrategias que
Did
utilizamos.
anyone, you know, from the breakout rooms, were you kind of nodding on like, yeah, this is a goal I would put in my orgs? Or
Por
was anyone
ejemplo,
like, no, we're
alguien de las personas que
and
estuvieron en los
this
grupos
only
pequeños puede
solidifies
decir,
our
esta es una de las metas que quiero poner en mi
anybody wanna
organización.
share any thoughts or
Si
things?
quieres
Our group
quieren
talked
compartir
about it a
algo,
little bit, but I'd love to hear the wider group.
pero me gustaría escuchar lo que compartieron.
Lauren, so you got off mic on mic. Were you gonna say something?
No, I hit it by
Oh.
accident. I'm so sorry.
Oh.
But I guess to put me on the floor, on the spot, I guess, one of the things that I think
Una de
is
las
common
cosas
through a lot of
que
the
es común en las diferentes organizaciones,
if you're having attrition, getting the information about
te falta
why
realmente
programs
más
aren't
personal.
working or why somebody's not re-engaging can be really challenging because they're not re-engaging.
Necesariamente saber cuáles son las razones por las cuales personas
And I
no están
think that
participando.
comes across, and our group is really varied from social to environmental.
Y
and
esto a
everything in
veces, esto
between,
fue algo
in terms of
que se
knowledge on
habló
that-
en el
that
grupo,
list
esto
that
puede ser un
comes.
aspecto
So I
social,
think it would be
aspecto
really
del
interesting
ambiente.
to kind of brainstorm ways of cracking that nut.
Y realmente ver cuáles son las maneras en que podemos romper con eso.
Years ago, in the substance misuse field, we had a lot of attrition. Just given the work we do, we were
Por ejemplo,
outpatient,
en los diferentes
we just
talleres
had a lot of attrition as well. But
de
something we
nutrición
found
teníamos muchas personas que
helpful
no
is,
participaban, que faltaban.
we called it kind of like an exit interview of sorts. And, you know, people would inform us like, hey, I'm good. I no longer want to, you know,
Y
do
realmente
work
lo
with
que
this
hicimos fue
and
llamamos a las
that.
personas y nos
And
decían,
we
yo estoy
found that
bien,
when
realmente no
we
quiero
did
más
like an
participar.
exit interview process,
Y eso lo
and,
hacíamos
you
cuando
know,
terminábamos,
ended up breaking
hacíamos
conference,
una
like some people's
entrevista
only
al
said, oh, I was
final
10
del
questions.
taller,
Some
le
people, oh, it was like
preguntamos a las
4.
personas por qué no querían
You know,
seguir
I'm really a big
participando.
fan of the stop, start, and continue framework. We use it a lot in retros. What should we start doing? What should we stop doing? And what
Y
should
yo
we
soy de las
continue?
personas que ella dice que es
That was a
fanática de
really
las
great
personas
word
de la
that I
que
sometimes
comenzar
use.
algo
And, you know, it's
cuando
really great
funciona y
that
también
the
detenerlo cuando no funciona.
participants are pretty open, you know, like I did not
Los
like this,
participantes
you know,
estaban
I did not
muy,
like that. I think you guys should
fueron
maybe
muy
take a
sinceros,
look, you know,
no me
better
gustó
figuring
esto,
or
me gustó lo
figuring
otro.
this, or I think, you
Esto
know, this
esto
part
me
is
recordaba
probably
de
when you
esto,
guys
esto
did
me
this,
recordaba de
or
aquello otro.
things like that was very helpful in
Y
terms
eso
of
realmente nos ayudó a
capturing
nosotros
some of that
bastante.
data and then being
Capturar
creative
esa
with it, right?
información
So
como
working
tal.
through phone. it wouldn't be in person just because, you know, maybe they're on to something else at that time.
Y esto
So,
no sería en persona, sino
bit more
simplemente
work on the staff side, but I like to say, you know, I felt like sometimes the work I did, I was like, you're wearing all these hats, you know? So,
o sea, como que el trabajo que hiciste, pues realmente
Sandra?
no.
I know that we're at time, so I did put in the chat the post assessment in case anyone does have to step out. We are wrapping
Eh,
up and going into
Ella
the final
puso en el
reflection,
chat
but if you do
la
need to
encuesta
hop out,
después de la
please give an
presentación,
opportunity
pues si
to
alguien se
do the
tiene
post
que ir,
assessment, just so that way we can use disaggregated data
para que
from that
nosotros realmente
in
podamos
our
utilizar la data desagregada.
Thank you so much for that, Dr. Ray.
Gracias por esa
Sandra, were
información.
you gonna say something?
No.
No, I believe she's interpreting.
Ya.
Was anyone else kind of wanted to share in terms of like
¿Alguien
what
más
was
quiere
visible
compartir?
or a problem they noticed as well? Because like just now what we did
¿Algún
was I
problema?
saw people writing down, you know, helpful strategy piece.
Algo que quieran compartir, que una estrategia que vayan a utilizar?
I will call on someone from my group to share before I end out
Voy a
with
llamar a
one more
alguien de mi grupo
strategy
para que comparta.
up my sleeves. But I had a really great group with some great
Realmente tuve
people.
un gran grupo con personas muy buenas que compartieron.
Priscilla was in my group.
Shannon, Priscilla.
I had some great people in there.
Tuve realmente.
Anyone want to share?
¿Alguien más quiere compartir?
You suggested that our group look into how the junior league gets their information, so I'll pursue that. Thanks.
Oh, yes, yes. So we talked about context, right? Priscilla brought up a really good point, how her
Hablamos
organization
también
was
sobre
volunteer
contacto.
org, right? So, you know, you kind of, it's a little bit of a different case study to consider. And I talked about my prior work with Tampa, Junior League, New York, things
Yo
of that
hablé
nature.
sobre mi
And they do a
trabajo
really
antiguo
great
con
job
Tampa.
of not only collecting that data, but also collecting that data and diversifying their volunteers.
Es como realmente
So
recopilar
Priscilla
la
was
data y
really interested in
diversificar
that, and
la
that was a
data con los
really helpful
diferentes
case study.
voluntarios.
So that's something I encourage you guys to do as well.
Y eso es
You know,
algo que
maybe you're a
realmente yo les
volunteer
exhorto a
org,
que hagan.
maybe you're an animal justice org, maybe you're a youth service org, you know,
Por ejemplo, tengo una persona
seeing,
que
you know,
trabaja
other
con
kind of
organizaciones
familiar
donde
examples
protegen a,
and
protección
kind
a
of
los
going from
animales
there,
o
because some of
con
it's
los
open
juventud.
data. Like I know with
Y realmente mucha de esta data es data
organizations I
abierta.
suggested, that's all, you can go online and find that. So that could be very helpful for like a November all hands meeting, a November org meeting. Lastly, I wanted to share, we had a good discussion on the board. So we had a discussion on
quiero
interests and
compartir que tuvimos una gran
the data. We worked
conversación
with
con la
other
Junta.
community members.
Hablamos sobre el de la
And, you know, the board
comunidad,
is interested, but there's so many things they're doing and thinking
todas las
about,
cosas que
you know,
están
the board,
haciendo.
the community members. And something I suggested that I would put
Y
as
algo
a
que yo
sub-bullet
sugerí
point in that action plan is
en
really
ese
the
plan de
board,
acción,
really letting them help with at least one or two potential possible action items on the post.
precisamente dejar que los miembros de la comunidad participen en
So
algunas
if you did use data, you disaggregated it, maybe
acciones,
you found
algunos
out
puntos que
that,
podemos poner
you
en
know,
práctica.
there's a need to
Hay una
get
necesidad
more
de
more students from, you know, XYZ county or something.
Por ejemplo, hay una
And you
necesidad de
had the
tener
data
más estudiantes del
supported.
condado
What are
X
your,
o
you
Y.
know, maybe outreach changes you would do to do
¿Cómo
that?
podemos
Some of your
llegar
partners,
hasta
maybe your
ellos?
partners work with that county. You could put
Trabajar
some
con
more
con
flyers
los
there, the list
socios,
goes on and
trabajar
on.
con el
Also, like
condado.
tapping on, you know, to your board in terms of their networks in that area. Tapping
También
on your
cuáles son los
board in terms
diferentes
of their,
grupos,
you know,
organizaciones de
connections
comunidad
also
para
in that
poder
area.
llegar a
The
esos
list goes
jóvenes.
on and on. But in the
La
past,
lista
it's been
puede
helpful
continuar.
having them tying on to some of the implementation piece. I was
¿Cómo
joking,
realmente
like
podemos
results are cool, but you know, some people are like, results are
implementar
great, cool, not my thing,
este
but
tipo de
implementation, I'm
información?
excited. Like that's action, that's change management, that's getting down in the mud. So
Acción,
I
esto
find
realmente es
sometimes that
cambio
can be a helpful way to keep the thread
en la
across,
administración.
have everyone, you know, pulling on that ladder of change and success.
Simplemente
And, you know,
decirle a
leveraging
toda la
data,
comunidad que
disaggregation,
participe y que
data
sea parte de esa
best
escalera para
practices.
poder llegar arriba.
So we will now kind of pause here.
Vamos a
I'd like to thank
en este
everyone
momento.
so much for coming out today.
Quiero
I
agradecerles
did
a todos
want to
por
name
estar
you
el
to
día
have
de hoy
office
aquí.
hours December 7th.
Quiero
And
decirles que las horas de oficina son el 7 de diciembre y tengo algunas actualizaciones.
It's an incredibly rich time.
Por favor,
We
vengan.
problem solve, we share screens.
Realmente
If you like,
resolvemos
if you like
problemas,
this, we've got a lot more
compartimos
thick and thin
información.
in the office hours. So it's a really great time. And additionally, we stay for the whole hour. So we had
Y también nos
some people
quedamos
last time maybe come a little later.
quedamos
That's
toda la
fine.
hora.
If within that hour we're there. So we really encourage you to come, bring a friend. You'll get extra Dr. Wright and Dr. Herbert points.
Les exhorto a que
Just
vengan,
kidding.
que traigan un
But,
amigo,
we'd
una
love to see
amiga.
you guys there. So
Y me
I'll
encantaría
stay on the
verlos a
call
todos
for a
allí.
little bit, but
Me quedo en la
thank you
llamada por
guys
un
so
poco más.
much, and we hope to
Gracias a
see
todos
you
por
in the next
participar
training.
y espero verlos en el próximo entrenamiento.
Thank you, Dr. Herbert. Thank you, Dr. Wright.
Gracias,
Thank
Dr.
you, everyone,
Herbert.
for joining us today.
Gracias
And our next
a
training
todos por
is
estar aquí el día de
on
hoy.
December 5th. So hopefully we'll see you there, but we'll send out more information
Y la próxima
as we get a little bit closer.
capacitación o
So
presentación
enjoy
va a
the
ser
rest of your day.
Ajá.
Thanks.
y espero que disfruten el resto del día hoy.